You are now watching Gravy Movies.
Gravy Movies Episode 4, the first and probably the only ultimate Oscar special. Today, Mike and I will be selecting our all-time personal favorite Academy Award nominees and winners in most of the major categories. Mike, you look fabulous. It's so nice to see you on the red carpet tonight. Who are you wearing?
I am wearing Banana Republic. I'm not balling out on a budget here. Mildly mannered clothes, but doing my best Vito Corleone impression. Got my little pocket square, got my mustache.
You look sharp. I went for
Thank
something
you.
a little more casual. This is the I don't know the brand. This is the suit I bought last year for way too much money because I had to go to a wedding, and now I'm trying to utilize the suit as much as possible.
That'll do it.
That's why I wear the suit in the snack
You
videos.
didn't read the tag right before we got on air here? Oh gosh. That's a lovely image.
It didn't say.
Oh my god.
Oh, here we go. It's I don't know. It just says I have. Oh, here it is. It's Mantoni. It's Mantoni.
Mantoni, okay.
It sounds Italian.
He's wearing Mantoni, folks.
It's fine wool. It's 100% fine wool. It's good
Wow.
for hot environments. That's why I bought it.
Fancy.
Okay. Mike, are you excited for this evening's festivities? I know we watched a decent amount of movies to prepare for this.
Yep.
Most of them aren't making the cut.
Majority, yeah, no.
But is there anything we want to mention now that isn't going to get the time of day during the episode? I know I have a couple things I'd like to bring up.
Yeah, first of all, I'm thrilled to be here. This has been weeks in the making. A lot of research went into tonight, but it was a lot of fun research and arduous decision making. And I, for one, love the Oscars every year. Even when Will Smith slaps the shit out of somebody, it's great television.
Well, that's the thing. Like the disasters are what makes it.
I wish I could slap you through the Zoom recording right now.
Yeah, no, we don't have our special effects budget up to pulling something like that off.
But I'm very much looking forward to the Oscars, the actual Oscars this Sunday. And of course, we'll release this episode the Friday right before so everybody can tune in. But yeah, in preparation for this episode, I tried to watch things that have received critical acclaim in the past that I haven't watched. And nothing really swayed my mind too much on the nominations that I already made. So I watched The Deer Hunter. It was a great film.
It's awesome.
I thought it's awesome. I think maybe a little overhyped from in my opinion.
Really? Okay. What didn't live up to what you were expecting?
It's not that it didn't live up. I just when I thought of The Deer Hunter, I thought of this is one of the great all-time films. It won a ton of awards, and I thought it was really good, well made. I have a lot of respect for it being the first film that really took on Vietnam, which I feel like is maybe what boosted it to its status. The acting performances are great. I don't know. I guess in general, it's just a bit long, and I don't mind a long movie, but I just thought it was tough to really fully get into. But man, the Russian roulette scenes, those alone were worth it.
It was a different movie than I expected. I don't know what movie
totally.
I thought I was going to watch, but it wasn't what it was. Excuse me. The pretty fractured nature of the structure, like an hour at home, an hour in Vietnam, and then kind of an hour all over the place back at home after the war, going back to Vietnam. It was a lot more travel based or location based than I expected. And I also thought the Russian roulette scene was just a famous scene of the movie. I didn't realize it was a recurring kind of theme or the heart of the movie. But those scenes are so fucked up and captivating, especially the first and the different nature of the Russian roulette scenes, where it's torture based, and then it's gambling in a game, and then it's people are really fighting for their lives. I love kind of the different energies they all had behind it, even though the same thing is going on and going on. Walken's incredible, so is De Niro. They totally like lose themselves in those roles. And I'm sure you know like the history of John Cazale and like the story behind the movie with him and stuff, but like
Meryl Streep.
Thank God they fought for him to be in the movie, because he's such a crucial piece of the puzzle, even though he's not like the guy that goes to Vietnam or anything. Like you need a guy like that at home. You need a guy.
And I heard Meryl Streep did the film just so she could be with him towards the end.
Yeah, yeah. And they all threatened to quit if the studio wasn't gonna make the movie with him. And I think even Cimino was like behind them in that regard. But yeah, just a huge epic movie that to me actually lives up to the hype. The final moment is goofy as hell. And
but you didn't nominate it for anything tonight, correct?
I didn't.
Okay.
I could see. Here's the thing. Like, I was trying not to overthink these categories.
Sure.
I could tweak these categories so much. So many other nominees are worthy of bumping what I chose off the list. I could talk about so many of these movies. But I kind of have a method to my madness that we'll explain as we go through the categories.
I think we have two different philosophies here, but also similar in some regard. I feel like every category I treated a little bit differently with what I nominated and what I chose to win.
Yes, I want to represent things that I don't think got enough recognition. Of course, they were nominated. That's why they can be talked about today. But I think a lot of things were forgotten about or not disrespected, but not really given. Obviously, time tells more than the moment, right? Like in retrospect, we know a lot more about where these careers went and what we wish we got more of. And that's kind of the area I'm working in here.
Well, hey, maybe next year we do a greatest Oscars snub list of all time. That could be a fun episode to do. But yeah, I agree with you. I think for me, at the end of the day, I tried not to reward any one single film because obviously like 90 years of Oscars, hundreds of films. There's so many deserving winners out there. I wanted to spread the wealth as much as possible across my winners. That being said, though, I was sort of no bars held or whatever with my nominees. Like with my nominees, I just nominated what I thought were the best 5. So there's a lot of films that I gave several nominations to. Doesn't mean they all won. But I really tried to put forth the best. And I made a few exceptions to get some inclusion in there where I saw fit. But I think you might have more variety at the end of the day than I do. If we were to tally up how many films were represented, I think you probably got me beat.
Yeah, I just had to go with my instincts on this one. We've done so many of these like draft type things, unreleased podcasts that we have. We've done this kind of thing so many times, and I always overthink it. And
always.
At the end of the day, it's the same result. You know what I mean? So I might as well just save a little time and stick with my gut here.
So why don't we explain the rules?
Before we dive into it, the rules are pretty simple. We are going through most of the major Academy Award categories. Best supporting actor, cinematography, editing, best picture, special
we have
effects,
16,
blah, blah, blah.
16 in total.
But we individually picked 5 nominees for each category, and that's all they had to be. They just had to be nominated. We're not picking the best winners. We're not picking the best of the year. We're picking anything that was eligible for the awards. It's a little messy, but I think it makes sense.
Yes, it's not just any film ever either. It has to be Oscar nominated at some point, but did not necessarily have to be a winner. Because as we know in Oscars history, a lot of times we feel like the films that shouldn't win end up winning it. And so, nominees are snubbed. So any nominee was fair game. And then from the 5 nominees for every category that we put forward and 10 for best picture, we are picking one winner.
I think the best way to show this is to start doing it.
Yeah.
So Mike, why don't you kick us off with best supporting actress?
All right. And we are going to go not exactly, but in a similar order that the actual Oscars telecast will be. And so they always start usually with the supporting actor and actresses awards up front, a little bit of excitement. So, like Dom said, starting tonight with best supporting actress, my 5 nominees are Marissa Tomei in My Cousin Vinny, Michelle Williams, Brokeback Mountain, Abigail Breslin for Little Miss Sunshine, Viola Davis for Doubt, and Rooney Mara for Carol. Now, do you want me to reveal my winner now or let you nominate yours and then we'll reveal winners?
Maybe I should say my nominees
Yeah, say
first,
yours
because
first and then we'll declare the winners.
so I have Tatum O'Neal as Addie Loggins from Paper Moon in 1973. She won the Best Supporting Actress award that year. I have Jodie Foster as Iris Easy Steensma from Taxi Driver. It came out the same year, 1973. I have Lorraine Bracco, who played Karen Hill in Goodfellas in 1990. I have Julianne Moore as Amber Waves from Boogie Nights in 97. And I have Meryl Streep as Susan Orlean from Adaptation in 2002. We both had a child performance. I have 2, you have 1 in this category. What about these child performances stand out beyond the other nominees?
Yeah, and it's actually funny. I remember we talked about child performances during the M. Night episode and how they are a difficult thing to judge, and sometimes they're nominated for awards for better or worse, right? In this case, for better, but sometimes we even see child or children actors get Razzie nominations. But I don't know. For me, in terms of Abigail Breslin, she is the heart and soul of Little Miss Sunshine, which is a film that I absolutely adore. I mean, it really is like a tour de force of acting with that entire cast: Paul Dano, Steve Carell, Alan Alda. It is
Arkin.
a Arkin. So I always confuse those two, Arkin and Alda.
No, it's okay.
And Arkin won the Oscar that year as well.
Great movie,
But
great cast. Tony Collette,
it's
too.
so good. Tony Collette, yep. And yeah, I think just Abigail Breslin for her age shows a lot of heart, shows a lot of tenderness, but also a fun-loving side in that film. And I just wanted to give it some love. So I went with Abigail Breslin as a
No,
nominee.
yeah, that's there's something about the child performance that when it's good, it's not just good. It's like supernatural.
Yeah.
Because
And it's a short list. You think of like Natalie Portman in The Professional.
Yep, Dakota Fanning in Man on Fire.
Yeah.
These kids are more aware of their emotions and more in touch with themselves than I am at fucking 25 years old. You know what I mean? That's why it's so impressive to me, because they navigate humanity, a spectrum of humanity and morality as children. And maybe they're not super aware of that, but they are enough to be so believable in these awful situations. Little Miss Sunshine has some more lighthearted moments and stuff, but that's still a kind of a heavy movie. And
Totally.
Paper Moon isn't a super heavy movie, but that's a child playing a con artist. So you got to kind of understand what it means to trick people and to get one over on somebody, and what being a con artist is. Tatum O'Neal worked with her dad on that movie, Ryan O'Neal, so she probably had some guidance, but it's still super impressive. Jodie Foster in Taxi Driver is incredible, that she can play a character so down in the darkness, and like she's such a cockroach in the way she survives, but she's a child that acts like that, not a young woman, not somebody that like has some life experience. She's a child. So yeah, just that really impresses me. Those are 2 great child performances. The next 2, if I could just finish quick, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
Lorraine Bracco and Julianne Moore are channeling such raw, humane, huge performances that swing all over the place in both those movies. They're having fun. They're having the time of their life. Lorraine Bracco is getting swept off her feet by Henry Hill. She's in love. But then at the end of the movie, they're paranoid on coke, running from the government. Like there's so much they're both doing. Same with Julianne Moore in Boogie Nights. Like, she's on set as the hottest woman alive, quote unquote, but then she's also like fighting for her child and dealing with a coke problem, and in love with all these people like Burt Reynolds and Mark Wahlberg's character. So
Mm-hmm.
just the spectrum of what these women do, like, it's not a one note performance. All these performances are not one note performances. They are huge swinging performances. Meryl Streep, my final nominee, she basically plays two characters in this movie. Nick Cage famously plays two characters in adaptation, two brothers, but Meryl Streep does the same thing. If you're familiar with the movie, she is the author of the book the movie is adapting in the movie. But then when the movie takes a turn, she becomes a character in the movie and not just the source material or whatever. She's not just an author, she's a character in the story by the end of the movie, and she totally changes who she is. So that's kind of why the only person that won for me was Tatum O'Neal. I can understand why everyone was like enraptured by that. But yeah, kind of the diversity and the ambition of these performances is what attracts me the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And I actually only have one winner from my list as well, who's Marissa Tomei for My Cousin Vinny. Which I don't know. That's a film I could rewatch endlessly, and
Classic.
it's like
I just got
it's
it on
not
VHS.
wow, that's something. But
Perfect
it's like
VHS movie.
it's not your stereotypical performance that the Oscars would award if you think about it. But she really does bring such energy to that film and is really the driving force and a perfect sparring partner with Joe Pesci. Michelle Williams, Brokeback Mountain. I think she's been long overdue for an Oscar, and Brokeback Mountain is one of the most emotional films that I think you can experience, and that lives with those all four acting performances really across the board. I already talked about Abigail Breslin, Viola Davis, Doubt, another tour de force. You have Amy Adams, Meryl Streep, Philip Seymour Hoffman, but Viola Davis for me steals the show with like literally like no screen time whatsoever. She gets like 10 minutes, and
Okay.
it is like one big scene, and it is so memorable in my mind. For that reason, I had to give her a nomination. And then Rooney Mara, Carol, what a picture. What a picture. I feel like Al Pacino.
Carol is great.
Carol is great, and Rooney Mara and Cate Blanchett are a wonderful duo. But for me, should we announce our winners?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm going with Michelle Williams. I think in a long career of great performances, Brokeback Mountain is my favorite of hers. Because you really see the dichotomy of her character, right? Like how heartbroken she is about her husband, but also at the same time having such sympathy for what has occurred in their life and in their marriage. So for that reason, I'm going with Michelle Williams. And honestly, she would have had a great chance this year if she just went for the supporting nomination, but she went for lead with The Fabelmans. Can't falter.
Is that her though? That I feel like that's the camp, like that's the PR team and that's the marketing.
I don't know.
Stuff.
I kind of heard it was her, but I could be wrong. I wouldn't know.
I mean, I guess she's kind of the lead actress in that movie, but
But I think it's a film.
Character.
I think it's a film of supporting performances, though.
No, yeah, you're right.
But all right, who's your winner?
My winner is Julianne Moore for all the reasons I just said. Just huge, impressive performance. Julianne Moore can be in the worst piece of shit, and she is magnetically captivating every time. I mean, what else can you say about Julianne Moore, really? It's just a powerhouse performance in Boogie Nights. And I was lucky enough to see it on 70 millimeter a few weeks ago at the Arrow here in Santa Monica. And just what a movie. what a movie. And she is a very important piece of that puzzle.
Yeah. We won't get into it because I'm not that big of a fan of Boogie Nights, but
We
She
haven't talked about that, and I want to eventually because I
Yeah,
don't
but
understand it at all.
I do love her performance in it though. It is her and Burt Reynolds
Heartbreaking. It's
are so
heartbreaking.
good.
The
Are
scene,
so
this
good.
the scene where she has to like go to court for getting custody of her kid, and you only
Hmm.
see a couple minutes of that, but her reaction outside crying at the courthouse. I mean, that shit is heartbreaking.
Yeah. All right, well,
Uh,
let's keep the ball rolling.
yes, best supporting actor. Why don't you go first again, Mike?
Okay. My nominees are Robert De Niro for The Godfather Part 2, Joe Pesci for Goodfellas, Javier Bardem for No Country for Old Men, Christoph Waltz for Inglourious Bastards, and J.K. Simmons for Whiplash.
My nominees are Danny Aiello as Sal Frangione in Do the Right Thing. Am I butchering that, Mike? How do they pronounce it in that movie?
No, I think you got it.
Frangione. Robert Forster as Max Cherry in Jackie Brown. Burt Reynolds as Jack Horner in Boogie Nights. Jackie Brown and Boogie Nights came out in 97. Aiello or Do the Right Thing came out in 89. Tom Cruise as Frank T.J. Mackey in Magnolia, 99, and Philip Seymour Hoffman as Lancaster Dodd in The Master, 2012.
You got a lot of PSA, or you got a lot of PTA love on this ballot.
I do. And one thing I noticed about almost all of the acting categories for me was that I think I mean, names are so important, right? Like you got to have a
Hmm.
good name for your character. I'm not good with knowing character names in a lot of shows and movies sometimes. Like it takes me a bit if I'm watching a show and there's a lot of characters, it takes me a minute, especially a show like Game of Thrones or something. I'm not going to know anyone's names, but these
Hmm.
names are so specific. Like I knew it was Sal's Pizzeria. I knew it was Max Cherry. I know it's Jack Horner. I know it's Frank TJ Mackey. I know it's Lancaster Dodd. And I don't know if it's the names or the performances, but the fact that I knew the names without having to look it up says a lot for me. Um,
Mm.
Aiello is a huge part of Do the Right Thing. Every character is so well cast in that movie, but to me, Sal holds the whole thing together because there's a lot of heart there. Like Spike's perspective, Sal should be the outsider, the infiltrator, but the character is written so true and with so much love and respect that you no character in that movie besides maybe like the cops are looked at in like a really negative light. They're looked at as a human being with feelings and layers and perspective. It's a big honest performance, and that's kind of what I'm attracted to most in the acting categories, like honesty, like raw
Mm.
honesty. um the next two, Max Cherry and Burt Reynolds, they're doing similar things with two very different characters. Max Cherry is more reserved. Burt Reynolds is a porn director. He's boisterous. He's involved in the world of pornography. Um, but they're just cool as hell. They're slick and they're charming, but there's also a lot of pain underneath it all. Like any scene you see them alone or a moment they have to themselves, just pouring a drink or sitting in their office, there's like pain in those eyes. And you lean into it for a second, but the movie keeps going on and you don't really know what they're grappling with. And it just makes for a more multifaceted character. Uh, Tom Cruise for a second. We're both pretty big Cruise guys right now,
Yeah.
in the age of Top Gun Maverick and Mission
Can I just
Impossible.
say I remember uh I had a small acting role in one of your short films many years ago, The Painter,
The Painter, a great one of our
and
best.
one of your best performances by yours truly. And I got to be the painting instructor. And I remember I asked you like what sort of like vibe did you want for this character? And you told me a mix of Bob Ross and Tom Cruise from Magnolia. And I remember watching that film and watching Tom Cruise. And I was like, there's no way I can imbue this energy, but
Well, you still
the,
did a good job. It worked for the
thanks.
movie. This is a huge, crazy performance from Tom Cruise, and I think it kind of broke him. Um, he, I mean, he's worked with some of the best directors ever. He's worked with Stanley Kubrick in Eyes Wide Shut. He's worked with PTA in this. And I wish we got more exploration from him now in his later years. He's so interesting, and I think he still has it in him. But I think the fact that I'm probably projecting, but I think the fact that he didn't get enough recognition, or he didn't win like a single award for any of these performances, kind of made him self-conscious or made him less interested in this kind of work. But he's so fucking good here. I mean, he's like a self-help guru about, but in more of like a toxic way, like you would see today. Like I don't know, he's not like a Jordan Peterson type or something, but there's that kind of like toxicity around him. Honestly, he's more like Andrew Tate, right? he's
Oh
he's kind of like
God.
Andrew Tate in this movie, um
Yeah.
in a way. But it's just a crazy huge performance, and it ends with such heartbreaking work from him. And fuck, what's his name? It's doesn't matter. um but the ending where him and his dad is just totally heartbreaking stuff.
Oh, Philip Baker Hall.
No, it's not Phil Baker Hall. He plays the
Oh.
talk show. Now I gotta look it up.
Uh,
I'll find out in 1 second, and we're gonna know it. Jason Robards that
oh,
play that
yep.
he's the network president, that kind of like ties everything together, whether you know it or not, in Magnolia. Another PTA movie is The Master, and Philip Seymour Hoffman does probably the best work of his career in this movie. So many ups and downs. You can understand why people are so attracted to him in this movie. For a movie like this to work, the cult leader, quote unquote, needs to be magnetic, and he is. But then there's all this behind the scenes you see of him drinking with Joaquin Phoenix's character, and his wife berating him and like punishing him for his actions and stuff. How fucking sick it all is. He's perfect in the movie.
Why don't you declare your winner?
My winner's Philip Seymour Hoffman.
There you
It's an
go.
actor that we lost way too soon. He's just a total powerhouse in everything he's in, whether it's a stupid comedy like Along Came Polly, or one of the greatest movies of all time like The Master. He's just perfect in everything he's in. He's a fucking chameleon. Like even in like Mission Impossible 3, where where he's acting as Tom Cruise playing the villain, there's so many layers to it. He's so good at all that stuff. Philip Seymour Hoffman will always have a place in my heart. So yeah, I got to give it to him. I almost gave it to Burt Reynolds, but
You can't go back to back Boogie Nights.
no, exact kind of that was part of my process.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, there's no denying what Philip
Yeah.
Seymour
I mean,
Hoffman
at
does in
the end
this
of the
movie.
day, every nomination in all of these categories would be a deserving winner in some way, shape, or form. So it
I
is
almost
difficult.
also picked Joe Pesci, because
For what film?
Goodfellas, because it's like part of my process too was like, could another actor play this role? And
Yeah.
a lot of roles can be played just as well or better by other actors, and it's still impressive that that actor did that thing. But Joe Pesci is like perfect in Goodfellas.
Yeah.
Goodfellas is not the same movie without Pesci.
No. And I think that's kind of how Joe Pesci is, because he's so particular in a lot of films, right? Like I can't imagine, like, even though it's a similar role and maybe he's typecast a little bit. And that's what I loved about The Irishman, is that it was such a turn for him, I felt like. But we see the similar Joe Pesci character in Goodfellas, in Casino, but it's so effective every time. Um, but yeah, so he was certainly one of my nominees. And another one of my nominees, Robert De Niro. There's so many performances that I could have picked for him in both the supporting and the lead category.
Yeah.
The reason why I chose The Godfather Part 2 is because I feel like it was such a task for him to take on the aura and the persona of Vito Corleone as a character, and also like show us his roots and how he came to be, and sort of the inner battle with him. Like, he wasn't always the Don. And not only that, but he had to follow up Marlon Brando And when I watch the film, I don't see it as Robert De Niro playing Vito Corleone. I see it as Robert De Niro playing a version of Marlon Brando playing Vito Corleone. So for that reason, I just felt compelled to nominate him. I mean, what can be said about Javier Bardem? One of the most menacing villains in all of film history.
No, I agree.
J.K. Simmons, also a menacing villain in film history for different reasons, but
Honestly, you picked like all bad guys, Mike. Like
I did pick all bad guys.
I guess Vito is a little more morally gray than the rest of them in a way, but not really. Like you picked two guys in a mafia, a serial murderer, a Nazi, and a abusive coach.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, you're a little darker than I thought, Mike. What's up with this? So did you see this theme while you were picking them?
No, not at all. Actually, I picked the performances that stuck with me, and I just like, I can envision, J.K. Simmons like, "You're not on my time," like fucking scary, honestly. And like, I had a drum teacher that was kind of like that, and for me, it was a very real film to watch. But I thought like in all of these guys also majority winners. I think Bob De Niro is the only one that didn't win. Or did he?
Let's look. We should know.
Now we look uneducated, but I don't think he won. But Joe Pesci won for Goodfellas, Javier Bardem won, Christoph Waltz won, J.K. Simmons won.
No, he did win, Mike.
Oh, I picked all winners. Look at me.
Yeah.
But that being said, my winner is Christoph Waltz. Just one of my favorite performances of all time. Inglourious Basterds, my favorite Tarantino movie. And what sticks out to me with him, I guess, is I don't know. He's like a chameleon, man. He can variety in his characters, and he can just like he steals every scene that he is in and really molds himself, and also just like his or trilingual ability, I think also like sticks out on film when you watch, and just like the opening to Inglourious Basterds with him asking for a glass of milk all the way towards all the way towards the end when he is questioning Brad Pitt on the pronunciation of his name. He is menacing. He is funny. He is the star of that film, one of my favorite films of all time. So it was certainly a difficult decision. And I went back and forth, but ultimately it all came down to Christoph Waltz.
Especially too, because like Tarantino was going to give up that project. One, because the script got leaked and he was pissed about it. But two, he could not find his Colonel Hans Landa. And it wasn't until Christoph Waltz auditioned where he was like, fucking finally, I found the guy. And he found the guy.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny to me that I think Christoph Waltz is such a good actor, but what else is he in besides the two Tarantino movies? I know he's in Alita Battle Angel and a couple other random things. And I know he has probably a history of like German work or whatever before Tarantino brought him into the American mainstream. But like for only having two performances that like stick with me,
2 wins, 2 nominations.
I mean, he's like one of the best like character actors we have.
He's batting 1,000.
Well, I guess if we looked at his other movies, that might not be true, but
no, but I'm Oscar noms. He has
oh, sure,
he's
yeah,
won
yeah,
two.
of course,
yeah.
So yeah, and it's also it's funny to see our maybe not so much for supporting actress. You're a little more spread out, but like for me, it's like in supporting actor, it's broken men that have a lot of like they're holding on to a lot of animosity. There's a lot of like darkness in them that they're still working through, but they're working through it, and then you just straight up you're attracted to bad
darkness.
guys.
Yeah,
you're attracted to bad guys. So it's interesting to see that so far.
Why don't you intro our next category? I'm getting tired of it.
The next category is best cinematography. this was a tough one for me because there's so many gorgeous movies that were nominated, and there's so many more gorgeous movies that weren't recognized at
Yeah.
all.
And back in the day, they split the category between black and white and color. So there's even more nominees that we had to parse through.
It's funny to see the evolution of the Oscars, both in terms of how many things were nominated this year, in terms of what the category is actually called, in terms of what movies people are attracted to. There's a stretch from like the 50s to the 80s, kind of in the 90s too, where there's just so many straight up good movies that like they're genre-based movies. Like it's crazy that Marissa Tomei is acting in a comedy and won best supporting actress. Like that would not happen today. It doesn't matter how good the movie is, how funny the movie is, how good the performance is. They don't care about comedies like that anymore. I have another movie I'm going to talk about later that to me is like a shock, was such a big Oscar movie. But I might as well just introduce my nominees. The Third Man, it was a black and white nominee, or it won actually. It won the black and white category in 1950. The DP was Robert Krasker. Barry Lyndon won in 1975. The DP was John Alcott. In 1979, Vittorio Storaro won for Apocalypse Now. In 2011, Emmanuel Lubusky was nominated for The Tree of Life. And in 2019, Yaron Blaski was nominated for The Lighthouse. To me, cinematography is more, I mean, I love cool shots. Like I'm a cool shot guy. If you got cool shots in your movie, I'm going to, you know, I'm in. Like give me the cool shots. But also the shots have to convey something. It has to be in service of the story. And all of my nominees do that. And in The Third Man, they explore the paranoia and the mystery of a noir story perfectly in that black and white photography and all the shadows and all in the depths of the tunnels. Like they're playing with all that stuff. In Barry Lyndon, there's love and war and loss and pain and every feeling that could be depicted in like a classical painting. If you walk through a museum of beautiful oil paintings, you're basically watching Barry Lyndon. Apocalypse Now, they portray a descent into hell and madness with the colors, the red, the orange, the smoke. The Tree of Life is like a dream, and then The Lighthouse is basically a nightmare. They're all perfectly exemplified visually here. My winner is Barry Lyndon from 1975. It's hard to compete with a movie that was shot with natural lighting. The candlelit photography is fucking insane, but it's also the blocking and the framing and the slow zooms. All of those things that create a perfect epic story. The epic story, I'm not really into epics. Like the epic, because they're always long as fuck. They're always slow. They always explore territory that I'm not interested in. But there's a few that defy that for me, and Barry Lyndon is one of them. Barry Lyndon is funny and it's heartbreaking and it's fucking violent and sad, but it's the most beautiful shit you've ever seen at any given moment.
Yeah, totally. And this is actually the first category where we have a little bit of crossover with our nominees, and rightfully so, because like you said, some of these films are really the greatest examples ever of cinematography. And so my 5 nominees are actually all winners in their respective years for the Oscars. I think they got it right with all 5 of these. So mine are Days of Heaven. And so another Malick movie. We just chose different ones. Barry Lyndon, like you just said, your winner. Apocalypse Now, you also had on your list. I went with The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, which, and I'll get to it in a second. And then lastly, my final nominee is There Will Be Blood. I think all of these were deserving winners. What I was going to say was real quick with The Lord of the Rings, it's so interesting to me that it won Best Cinematography for The Fellowship, and then didn't go on to get nominations for The Two Towers or The Return of the King, which, I mean, I guess maybe they're thinking, well, we already rewarded it once. Why would we do it again? But at the same time, it's like they shot all 3 of those films at the same time. So the cinematography value is pretty much the same for all three. And also you would think, like Return of the King won 11 Oscars. Like it's weird to like withhold this nomination in this category for that film. But Lord of the Rings, I think, is so beautiful. Part of the reason why I love the cinematography is that they make such great usage of the natural landscape in New Zealand, but also marry it brilliantly with all of their visual effects and their production design. And at the same time, they do a lot of cool stuff with the camera, particularly with the hobbits being shorter and like their scenes with Gandalf and Frodo where they have to do, I don't know the technical term for it, but it's like, that split lens sort of thing to
the
make
split diopter.
Yeah, to make Gandalf look so much more bigger than Frodo. So Lord of the Rings for me, very worthy nomination. Like you said with Barry Lyndon, every frame is a painting. It could be in a museum. Days of Heaven, even though again not one of my favorite films, it's probably my least favorite of my nominees, is the one thing that you remember from, or I should say the two things I remember from it the most are how beautiful it is, and then the Ennio Morricone score. There Will Be Blood, one of my all-time favorite movies. Again, like There Will Be Blood is one of those films where you just see snippets on like the one perfect shot accounts, like all of the time. I think of like Daniel Day-Lewis out in the field with the surveying instrument. Like that's the shot that comes to mind when it is There Will Be Blood. But my winner is Apocalypse Now. And really, when it came down to it, I was stuck between Apocalypse Now and Barry Lyndon.
So same.
I went with Apocalypse Now because in general, I just like it more as a film. So I was swayed a little bit in that way. I wasn't just.
See, that's funny because I also like Apocalypse Now
Yeah,
quite a bit more.
Yeah, you were
but
more.
I had to honor the category.
Yeah, you were a bit more unbiased than I was, but I mean, at the end of the day, the cinematography in both of them is so fantastic. I actually I don't know like if I could say like Barry Lyndon I think is truly better. Just because like Apocalypse Now I think is different, right? Like Barry Lyndon is beautiful. Apocalypse Now is dark. It's fiery. You're up in the
dirty.
Helicopters.
You're sweating the whole time.
You got Martin Sheen coming out of the water with all the muck on his face. Like, I don't know, man. Apocalypse Now is pretty fucking fire. So
the napalm, the whole napalm sequence too, with Duvall dropping the gas on people is fucking insane too.
And you know what? It was an Italian that did the cinematography, Vittorio Storaro. So I'm a little biased in that regard as well. So my winner is Apocalypse Now.
Both worthy winners, and it sounds like we were both split between the same things here.
Yeah. A lot of similarity with our next category too, but I'll let you kick it off.
I'm actually really excited to talk about this category, even though we beforehand were like, how do we talk about this category?
Yeah.
We're not experts with most of this shit. Like, I'm not a visual effects expert. I have some experience in the costume department. I have some experience like in editing and stuff like that. We didn't do any sound categories because we would be bullshitting the whole time.
Yeah.
But I think anyone can kind of look at visual effects in a movie, and it's all about believability, right? Like if you're watching the movie and you're believing what you're seeing, the visual effects are good and they're effective. And it doesn't mean they're the most realistic, and it doesn't mean that they're the most detailed or whatever, but it just has to bring the movie to life. So my 5 nominees are 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. It won in 1968. It's really funny to me that all of these other categories have like, special effects legends in that were nominated that worked in the department, but somehow in 2001 it was just Kubrick, or he was the only one in charge of the special effects. I'm sure he had a lot of like model makers and people underneath him, but it's funny that he's so meticulous and so focused that he's the one responsible for the visual effects. Next up is T2: Judgment Day. It won in 1991. Dennis Muren, Stan Winston, Gene Warren Jr., and Rob Stotak You probably recognize the name Stan Winston, and it's about to come up again for Jurassic Park. He also worked with Dennis Muren on this, the both of them. They worked with Phil Tippett and Mike Lantieri, that one in 1993. Phil Tippett, another legend. Stan Winston has done The Thing and Alien and the Terminators, a Jurassic Park. Phil Tippett worked on all that shit too, and he also recently made Mad God, a movie he's been working on for 20 plus years. That is one of the most impressive pieces of stop motion filmmaking I've ever seen, and it's fucking crazy it's not nominated this year for best animated movie.
Damn. I haven't even heard of it. I'm gonna have to watch that because
Oh man, yeah, Phil Tippett. Do you watch Poker Face? Have you heard of Poker Face?
I've heard. I haven't watched it yet, but that's Ryan Johnson wrote that, right?
Yeah, it's a Ryan Johnson a Murder of the Week show with Natasha Lyonne, but one of the murders of the week was about a like a movie special effects guy played by Nick Nolte, who's modeled after Phil Tippett, and Phil Tippett provided all the creatures and models and like made the workshop in the show for the show. Legend, you got to watch Mad God. Next up for me is Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. Jim Rigel, Randall William Cook, Richard Taylor, and Mark Stetson. It won in 2001. This is the only category with all my nominees have won. Lastly, Spider-Man 2, John Dykstra, Scott Stokedick, Anthony La Molinara, and John Frazier. It won in 2004. Before I dive deeper, Mike, I want you to introduce your categories because we're basically going to have the same conversation at the end.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of similarity here. And it's funny to me, you're really official. You read off all these names of people I've never heard of. I give them no credit. I just say the film title. I don't even bother with the year.
I almost just did the movie because most of our listeners are just friends of ours that don't know any of this shit. So it doesn't really matter. But I kind of wanted to honor the Oscars and say who was responsible for the actual awards.
Cool. Well, I'll cut to the chase. My nominees are 2001: A Space Odyssey, Star Wars, the original Star Wars, A New Hope, but at that time it was just called Star Wars.
Yep.
Jurassic Park, Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, so not The Fellowship, and Avatar, the first Avatar. And my nominees are all of my nominees are also winners, just like yours. But let's start with, I don't know, where do you want to begin?
Maybe 2001. We both have 2001, and it's kind of what I was saying before. It's like not every shot of 2001 is the most realistic. It starts with a bunch of men in monkey suits, you know. But kind of after the monkey suits thing, if you can like look past the monkey suits, which I think the monkey suits add a lot to the beginning of the movie,
they're
like
great.
It's not the same thing if it's puppets of monkeys or if it's, you know, some weird stock footage of monkeys or something, which they couldn't even do anyway. But like to get those kind of performances and what he wants out of monkey characters or caveman characters, it has to be guys in suits.
Yeah.
As the movie progresses, there's so much you see. You see a spaceship, you see like different corridors, you're out in space. But the ending,
the Stargate sequence
is one of the most mind-blowing things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And this movie is 50 something years old. Like, I don't think anything will beat that blast through the Stargate and ending up in that crazy lost room in time or whatever do you want to explain it as. Like, the journey there is worthy enough for a nominee for me.
Totally. And really, that was my philosophy with this category, was looking at films that change the game when it comes to visual effects, right? I think all of these films that we nominated in some way, shape, or form, you know, furthered the baton, but then also, you know, what has stood the test of time? What can you watch in 2023, even though it's 50 years old, and still say that's fucking amazing? And the Stargate sequence is that thing. And for me, it's the same thing with Star Wars, right? Like, sure, you could watch Star Wars today. It's not the most amazing visual effects. It might be a little bit goofy at times.
You can see the tape here and there.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like Star Wars was revolutionary with what they did, and George Lucas. You'll have to remind me what was the name of their like effects studio that they started.
Industrial Light and Magic.
Yes, that. Well, a lot of credit to them, and um,
They work on so many movies. Like you think they would only work on like Lucasfilm movies or
yeah,
a certain like production company, but ILM is credited for so many special effects and so many movies you watch that
hmm
you're not even aware of.
yeah, and it's like you could watch a newer Star Wars and say that like objectively speaking, yes, of course, 40, 50 years later, the visual effects are better in a newer film. But what was more impressive for the time, I think, is the original Star Wars.
There's so much charm in like those sets too, like all the spaceships and the miniatures and the lasers and kind of the soapy nature of the acting and stuff in that movie. Like that, I don't know, all those things complement each other.
Mm-hmm.
um Jurassic Park is like that shit looks better than most fucking movies today. Those all the dinosaur stuff in Jurassic Park, I mean, there's
Yeah,
there's so many monster based things or like creature based things. Like we just had Cocaine Bear come out. Like
and it looked like shit.
the dinosaurs 30 years ago in Jurassic Park look way more realistic than the bear and Cocaine Bear.
Yeah, and the thing too is like what a great decision in Jurassic Park to make the dinosaurs with the visual effects, right? Because at the time, I think when they started out, they were trying to do it with animatronics, and it wasn't working out, particularly the T-Rex because of how big it was.
No,
And if it
yeah.
got wet, they were having trouble moving it. Um, but they like because they really had to put it on the line. You like at that point in time, visual effects was still like what they were doing, animating these dinosaurs was such a new thing. Um, who knew how that was going to actually look, but it looks great to this day.
Yeah, I feel like both of our first movies, the only differences being T2 for me and Star Wars for you.
Yep.
This is the progression. This is the evolution. T2 is a fucking groundbreaking special effects movie because of the work they did in T1. Like Terminator 1 is like a horror movie and they nail like the Terminator look and the robots and the shooting and everything. But then to see the world way more in T2 and those flashbacks and that opening of Terminator 2, like that shit rocks and it looks just as good today as it did back then. And then Jurassic Park, like I just said, it's like these movies stand the test of time. Like they maybe certain things about them have aged one way or the other, but it's not the special effects.
Yeah. So I'm interested because I mean, for me, Avatar was a toss up. Like, there's nothing that needs to be said about Avatar.
It's
Game
a good
changer.
choice.
Game changer. Tell me a little bit more about Spider-Man 2.
So the reason I picked Spider-Man 2 was because of the blend of practical effects and digital effects.
Mm-hmm.
Um I love I love those Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies because they're so character based. I'm so sick of the superhero shit today where it's just like explosions, special effects, monsters, space, colors, backgrounds, running around, screaming, jokes. Like those early Spider-Man movies are so true to the character. Um, and one of the reasons it is so true is because you believe everything. I chose Spider-Man 2 over Spider-Man 1. I was going to choose one of the Spider-Man movies, mostly because of the Doc Ock tentacles. Um, they are a real thing, but they're also digitally enhanced. So
Mm-hmm.
they have the rig, but they're doing a lot of shit after the fact. The scene where they try and cut off Doc Ock's tentacles and it becomes a horror movie for 5 minutes and the tentacles are attacking all the doctors in the room and it becomes Evil Dead with the chainsaw and everything. That's kind of why I'm nominating the movie. That scene has stuck
Mm-hmm.
with me since I first saw it in theaters as a 7-year-old, and it still gets me today. It's brutal. All the Spider-Man stuff, all the web slinging and shit looks great, but it's mostly about the hand to hand. It's so specifically chosen what is enhanced. You know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
not like a big broad brushstroke. It's like okay, what do we need to do here? It's very technical. It's chosen.
Yeah.
So that's why I chose Spider-Man 2, because it's very much based in our world, and the things they choose to enhance make me believe that it is a New York City with Spider-Man and a crazy scientist with tentacles on his back.
Yeah. Well, then, and without further ado, our winners, we both chose The Lord of the Rings. You went with The Fellowship of the Ring. I went with The Return of the King. And I want to get into why they both won. So I want to, talk about why we chose separate films. But, for me, at the end of the day, the reason why I chose one of the Lord of the Rings films was that it felt like visual effects had never been, I guess, done on that scale before in such a sweeping fantasy epic. And then really I think this is the differentiator between my choice and your choice, is the motion capture technology that they used with Gollum. Absolutely groundbreaking stuff what Andy Serkis did. And I think like his acting performance is fucking insane and awesome as Gollum. And it was bullshit that the Oscars deemed him ineligible for nominations back in the early 2000s. I think that's a crime. And it's so lifelike the motion capture with Andy Serkis. And again, like I watch these films at least once a year. And the visual effects hold up very well today. But everyone knows I'm biased. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. So I want to hear why you chose the Lord of the Rings.
It's honestly a similar thing with the Spider-Man to me, even though it's a lot bigger. It's a great mix of practical effects, real shit that they're making with their hands, that they're putting on people, plus what they're doing afterwards. All the orcs, all of the Hobbit feet, like everything they do practical is so good. And then when they enhance it with like when Gandalf fights
The Balrog. Oh, what a scene.
that, and but what's the other wizard's name?
Oh, Saruman.
Saruman. That scene and the way their bodies twist and like that is so brutal. Like the way their bodies twist and slam, and the way these old men are sweating and screaming, but then they're fucking blasting each other with their magics, whatever's coming out of their magic staffs.
Their staffs, yeah.
Like all that shit is so good and so blended well. I mean, I watched the Lord of the Rings movies for one of our old podcast projects for the first time since I was young, really young, and I couldn't believe how hardcore these movies are. Like they don't hold back, and that's why I respect it. You could tone down these movies a little bit to make it more like kid friendly or something, but no, he is honoring the characters and the story and J.R.R. Tolkien through the special effects and through the cinematography and through the performances. So yeah, that's why it's there's so much going on and it's so deliberate.
Totally. And I'll just add one reason I also chose The Return of the King over The Fellowship is that is like when we see everything at its greatest scale. That big war at the end, Minas Tirith, is really they made a smaller scale city out of like a real model, but then the big city, they use visual effects and there's flying Nazgul and shit. So that's to me when it's like at its greatest. The destruction of the Eye of Sauron when the tower falls and the explosion of Mount Doom. It's on full display, the visual effects in The Return of the King.
Yeah,
But
Jackson is just so innovative. One last thing I want to say too is just like he's always thinking how to do things better. He's always like, I hate when shows, I worked on this movie once, right? And they wanted a shot of the camera behind a couch with the back of the characters' heads on each side of the frame. And they were struggling because they didn't know why the camera would be behind the couch when there's a wall behind the couch. who gives a fucking shit? If like that, the camera can go anywhere. The camera is not part of the real world. The camera is not
Yeah.
in that room. And that's why I love Breaking Bad so much. I watched Breaking Bad last night. There's a shot where they lay down a map and the map goes over the camera and it's like seeing through a table, and the map is translucent. You see all the roads and stuff on there. But then when it cuts to above the table, it's a normal table, it's a normal map with paper. Like, just because they were like, oh, let's do a cool shot where you see all the lines going over the characters, like you're looking through it. They did it because they're like, it's cool, and that's all you need. It's if it's cool, fucking do it. You don't need to think about, oh, why would there's no camera in fucking Middle Earth. Like, you don't need to worry about like where the camera's going. The camera can go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the perspective thing of the giant ring, they made the giant ring
Oh yeah.
and they put it in the foreground, and they would have the Hobbit actors being in the background to make them look the ring even bigger and more powerful and more important, and the Hobbits just emphasizing the scale of them too. It's just like such fucking creative problem solving. Like, they could have used a macro lens and put it next to a normal sized ring, but it would have been fucked up and goofy and stupid looking. But having a real giant ring be the ring is it I mean, it's just so much more visually interesting, even though you don't actually know what is going on.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
All
Very
right,
well said.
moving on from visual effects, but kind
Yeah,
of staying in the same world, is best animated feature. um let's go through this quickly. My nominees are Shrek from 2001. It won. Ratatouille from 2007. It also won. Fantastic Mr. Fox in 2009. Anomalisa from 2015. And Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse from 2018.
And my 5 nominees are Spirited Away, which won the Oscar, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Loving Vincent, Luca, and Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio from this year.
I kind of This is a category where I hadn't seen too much.
It's
And
also, though, let's just preface it, right? This is one of the newer categories at the Oscars. It only goes back. Shrek was the first film to win the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. So it's only been around for like 20 years.
that's right off the bat. That's why I picked Shrek. If you have to make a category because you're so afraid this cartoon is going to win Best Picture, that's one of the best animated movies ever. Like, there's no denying the impact and the cultural importance of Shrek.
Yeah. Amazing.
It has a sequelitis. Shrek is kind of a meme now in certain Twitter circles, but Shrek is still just like a great original movie.
Totally.
Ratatouille for me is the best Pixar movie. It's when they were really focused on worlds and story. I feel like they're rehashing the same shit about feelings now over and over and over again. Feelings and emotion is all they care about at Pixar at the moment. Ratatouille is just a beautiful story about like purpose and talent and like what you want to do with your life, even if other people say it's not right for you. Just a great.
I almost nommed Ratatouille. It was right on the cutting edge. I left it out because I have a thing with the Oscars. I think that they too easily give Pixar awards nowadays.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous.
I hate it. And so I made an active choice. I'm like, I'm only picking one Pixar film. I'm only picking one. I'm not doing 2. I knew you would do Ratatouille because I know you love it. And it was right there for me. Luca is my personal favorite, being Italian.
I have not seen Luca.
So I chose Luca for my Pixar film, but Ratatouille is a great choice.
No, I had the same thought process, though. I did not want to pick too many Pixar movies, even though The Incredibles is also one of my favorite animated movies. But and both Brad Bird movies, funny enough. You want to go through your categories, Mike, or did you?
Yeah, no, I went through mine. I just wanted to butt in about the Pixar thing. Tell me about Anomalisa.
Have you seen Anomalisa?
No.
Anomalisa isn't a movie I love. It's a movie I like, but it's a movie I wanted to show some recognition to. It's really interesting to see like just a kind of a slice of life story about humanity and what it means to like be lonely and to live, told through stop motion characters. Charlie Kaufman is one of our most talented screenwriters and directors today, and they tell a really compelling, interesting, funny, dark, heartbreaking story through the stop motion medium. And I think that's kind of similar to Pinocchio too. I haven't seen it, and I know you really want me to check it out. Everyone tells me
Yeah.
you and Matt
Oh,
Sacca have said I've been slacking, but
I think you'll really like Pinocchio
I think kind of the themes and obviously like
because
just
this is a dark Pinocchio, and it's about love and loss and Nazis.
yeah, I heard
Um,
it's like a fascism.
Fascist era Italy, Mussolini. Yeah. Um, some of the best, and we both, give a lot of love to stop motion on this list, right? Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, I think, is some of the best stop motion I've ever seen. They spent 3 years making it. They had like 60 different cameras going, all on different scenes, working on stuff. The level of detail they put into crafting all of those characters. And I just love the story of Pinocchio. I always have. The original Pinocchio is my favorite Disney film. Um, so I did choose Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio as my winner for Best Animated Feature. I think it's going to win this Sunday at the Oscars. And it's actually, I would say, one of my top 3 films of the year 2023, which I don't often say about animated films. So I was really moved by it. I've seen it several times. But also, right, we both gave love for stop motion with the fantastic Mr. Fox, Wes Anderson.
Yeah, and cutting to the chase, that's my winner. Um,
I'd say that's my runner-up.
Probably for all the same reasons you're picking Pinocchio is why I'm picking Fantastic Mr. Fox. One, it's a great adaptation of a Roald Dahl novel. Wes is really attracted to Roald Dahl and that kind of style and world, and that's obvious even in his live action movies. And it's just technically impressive. Every character, I was actually able to see some of the miniatures at the Academy Museum for Fantastic Mr. Fox. They had the model characters there, and just seeing them in real life, it's like crazy how detailed and how great the character design is for all of them. Because obviously you have the book to go off of, but to bring it to life with something people are making with their hands blows me away every time. I want to Before we move on, I want to give a little shout out to Spider-Verse 2, just because I think they're actually changing the game right now. That movie made it okay for animated movies to look different. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle trailer just came out, and I'm shocked at how it looks because it looks awesome. It's rough. It looks like a comic book. It looks like the original characters, and it's just way more visually interesting than the Illumination, Pixar, DreamWorks 3D models we've been dealing with for 20 years.
And before we move on, I'll also give a little bit of love to my other nominees as well.
Oh yeah.
So Loving Vincent, I chose as a kid. There's actually like, I wanted to be an artist when I was a kid. Like that was my first dream job when I was like 7 or 8, and Van Gogh was my favorite. I remember going, to the museum to see Starry Night, and there's been a couple of different films in the last decade or so about Vincent Van Gogh. There's the one where Willem Dafoe plays Van Gogh. But this one, Loving Vincent, is animated, and actually every frame of the picture is literally like painted by somebody. It's just like a bunch of paintings. And
Oh
so
wow.
for that reason, I had to give it a nomination because I thought the work done was just absolutely incredible. And a lot of the paintings, it's like his Van Gogh's actual paintings coming to life. The characters are moving and stuff. So it's really fantastic. And Spirited Away, I wanted to include because I wanted to give some representation to Studio Ghibli. And this Spirited Away was a film that I just watched for the first time this week in preparation for the episode. Funny enough, it's actually not my favorite Studio Ghibli animated film. That title would probably go to My Neighbor Totoro is my favorite, but that film was made prior to the Oscars having this award, so never got the chance to be nominated. I'm sure it would have been. had the award been around back then. So for that reason, I did want to nominate Spirited Away, which is a great film and it is deserving of its win. It was just a little, I didn't fully get it at first. It was a little wacky, but in hindsight, I'm really excited to rewatch it. So those are my nominees for animated feature. Like I said, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio is my chosen winner.
I think I also would have nominated this movie if I'd seen it.
Sure.
Miyazaki is such a blind spot for me. And going back to the Academy Museum, they have a whole Hayao Miyazaki Studio Ghibli section.
Yeah.
And just looking at all the cells and the original artwork and stuff, I was like, shit, I gotta fucking watch all these movies. And I watched Kiki's Delivery Service.
Oh, I
That's
love
the one
Kiki's. Yeah.
and it's a great movie, but that's as far as I got.
Yeah. And I will say too, from what I've seen on my Regal app, I think in the coming months, some of these films are going to be in theaters again for a limited time only. I don't know if it's some anniversary or something. So, maybe you have an opportunity to see some more there.
I think he is making or releasing his first movie in quite some time this year.
Yeah.
So that might be part of it.
Yep, totally. All right. Well, our next category is Best International Film. I think at one point in time it's called Best Foreign Language Film. But this is the official name now at the Oscars. And we had special rules for this category, right? Because this category is a bit different than the rest, where each nation, each country can nominate one film, right? So countries have to decide what film they are going to choose. An example that comes to my mind from recent years is Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which is one of my favorite films that I've seen in like the last 10 years. I was blown away by it. Famously, that year was not nominated for the Oscars because France chose to nominate Roman Polanski's Les Mis. So there are these rules with the Oscars, and we attach those rules as well. So as much as I love Italian cinema, I had to choose one. I could not nominate 5 Italian films here. So this did make it a little bit more difficult for us to, I think, choose our nominations, and also I think shows some blind spots that we have that we need to go out and see more foreign films. Because I will say, out of the 5 films that I chose, they are fucking bangers. And it annoyed me that I couldn't choose more from the list. But I mean, without further ado, my 5 nominees are Rashomon, Akira Kurosawa's from Japan, Cinema Paradiso, directed by Giuseppe Tornatore from Italy, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, directed by Ang Lee, that's from Taiwan, Parasite, directed by Bong Joon-ho from South Korea, and another round directed by Thomas Vinterberg. I'm pretty sure I said that right, and that is from Denmark. But Dom, who are your 5 nominees? Or I should say, what are your 5 nominees?
There's a couple
crossover. Yeah.
Couple crossovers here too with me and you. My first movie is Rashomon by Akira Kurosawa. It won in 1951. And there weren't even like other nominees it was competing against. It was almost just like a achievement award or like a recognition award for the it wasn't much of a competition back then. Day for Night, it won in 1973. It's a French movie by Francois Truffaut, famously directed The 400 Blows and other French New Wave important cinema. Ang Lee, also a little bit of a crossover. It's a movie from Taiwan. Yeah. It won in 2000.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. I don't think you said the title.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. In 2010, Yorgos Lanthimos' Dogtooth was nominated to represent Greece. And in 2019, Parasite famously won Best International and the Best Picture. So yeah, those are my nominees. Again, I was a little disappointed with myself when I wrote down all the movies that I had seen that were nominated, because it wasn't very many. And with the restriction of one movie per country, it like automatically kind of negated a few of them. I chose Rashomon by Akira Kurosawa. I watched this movie for the first
A
time a few
great
years
choice.
ago.
A great choice.
So ahead of its time for 1,000 reasons. It taught me it taught me how malleable perspective can be, and performance and structure and pacing. Like in every timeline they introduce, characters act differently because it's
Mhm.
from another character's perspective.
Yeah.
um
And that way of storytelling now has been used many times with film in other examples. But Rashomon for me was the first time that I really felt that on display and was completely moved by it.
I mean, yeah, it came out in 1951, and it's more forward thinking, it's more creative and innovative than so much that has come out since. It's also beautiful. It's
Oh,
crazy.
the cinematography.
It's crazy how Kurosawa decides to move the camera and what he decides to look through. There's so many shots looking through bamboo or looking through broken
Mhm.
windows or like holes in the wall or floorboards and stuff. Like you're always moving, you're always looking through things as if you're following these characters and you're like watching them without them knowing almost. Just fucking straight up beautiful movie. And honestly, I would argue it's like the most important out of all the ones we chose. Out of all the nominees, Rashomon is probably the most influential.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think um the film that would stand up to that argument would be Parasite, just because of what it meant to win both, best international film and then best picture. That really, I think, opened up the average audience more to foreign films, and really felt like a dividing line in the sand when it came to the Oscars. But neither of us chose it to win. For as great as it is as a film, I don't think it's necessarily the best film on our lists. I also want to give love to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which we both nominated. I saw that in theaters when they re-released it a few weeks ago, and it's just like it's as good as ever. Particularly if you love martial arts, the work that they do in that, the fighting and the style. But it's also just such a great story and great acting. Michelle Yeoh, who very could well win her first Oscar this weekend, gives an outstanding performance and probably should have been nominated for Crouching Tiger, which actually I believe Crouching Tiger is the most successful foreign film in Oscars history when it comes to um the number of Oscars it won, even more than Parasite, I believe. I think Crouching Tiger has 5 Oscars.
It's a movie that you can tell every department is working so closely with each other because like the stunt work and the wire work and the action sequences, the choreography, the special effects, they all have to be working with the set design. What is the set going to be like? What, like, the set has to match the stunts, and also the cinematography. The camera has to be able to follow what they're doing in a way. Like if they're trying to go too hard with the stunts and the camera's not able to do that, then they have to, work together to find middle ground. You can tell everyone is just like in sync on that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it won 4. It got nominated for 9 Oscars and won 4. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. But for me, my winner, no surprise, the Italian film Cinema Paradiso. And that was honestly the hardest decision for me, was not picking the winner, but was picking which Italian film I was going to nominate. It very easily could have been La Vita Bella by Roberto Benigni, who also won, and he won Best Actor famously and climbed over Steven Spielberg at the Oscars. That's an all-time great moment. I could have picked anything by Federico Fellini. But I went with Cinema Paradiso, and what really sold it for me, if you asked me like a year ago, I would have told you La Vita Bella. But what really, maybe a bit of recency bias, but I had an amazing experience when I went to London a couple of weeks ago. And while I was there, I went to this independent theater. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, the Prince Charles Cinema, which Quentin Tarantino is famously a very big fan of. They love him there. He's been quoted as saying it's the best independent theater out there. And they were showing Cinema Paradiso on 35 millimeter, and I went to see it, and I sat there and fucking cried for 2 hours. It is when it, there's a lot of films out there that are about the nostalgia and the love of movie making and what movies mean to us. And a lot of times those films are cheesy and are overdone. And I think now people are kind of getting sick of them. But this is the greatest example of that, I think, ever. You have this young boy in this poor Italian town who's just completely infatuated with his local cinema, and it means everything to him. But you also see what it means to the entire town. And I won't spoil how the rest of the movie goes, but to me, it's truly transcendental. You haven't seen it, right?
No, I have.
Oh, you have? Oh,
I
okay.
watched it in high school in Mr.
Well, you need to watch it again.
What's his name? He taught a history class of movies. It was like
Yeah, European cinema or something.
yeah, something like that. And
You
I watched
Das Boot.
Yep, I watched Das Boot. I watched
Yeah.
that Daniel Day-Lewis In the Name of the Father, the Irish
Mhm.
movie. There's a couple other ones. Oh, I watched Doctor Strangelove in that class.
Oh, good one.
But between Strangelove and Paradiso, those are the ones that stuck with me the most. I've been wanting to rewatch it just because it's always cited and people are always like posting screen grabs of the kid in the theater and stuff or in the projection booth. But I haven't rewatched it. But it still holds a pretty tender place in my heart.
Yeah, so great. All right. Next category.
Up, we're getting back into the technical categories here. Best costume design. This was kind of a hard one for me because there's so much great work out there. But I kind of, like I said in the beginning, just went with my gut.
Yeah, it's funny though, like looking at this too, just looking at our nominees before we get into them, we also sort of had a bit of a different philosophy, I think, in terms of what we rewarded, right? Because in typical Oscars fashion, I would say, at least in recent memory, they really tend to go for like the period pieces, the dresses, and it's not always about maybe the more fantastical costumes, if you will. But why don't you get into your nominees? And we'll
we definitely are split like that to a certain degree. My 5 nominees are Seven Samurai by Kohei Izaki in 1956, Barry Lyndon, which won in 1975. The designers were Milana Canonero and Ulla Britt Soderlund. In 1973, Cries and Whispers was nominated. The costume designer was Merrick Voss. In 2017, Phantom Thread won. The costume designer was Mark Bridges. And in 2019, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was nominated with the costume designer Ariane Phillips.
And my 5 nominees are Planet of the Apes, the original Planet of the Apes, Star Wars, the original Star Wars, The Last Emperor, The Grand Budapest Hotel, and Phantom Thread as well. So that's our one area of crossover is with Phantom Thread.
So I guess like a typical Oscar voter, I'm impressed by the costume picture and when they can really sell a period of time. Because I think people look at it as in like, nope, put them in old clothes. That's all you need to do. But to really sell it is another thing. Like so many shows or movies take place in a certain time and place, but they're too clean. There's something wrong. There's something off about all of them. Like the way the jackets lay or whatever, like takes you out of the time. And if you can't believe the characters and what they look like, then you're not going to believe the movie. So I think Seven Samurai, Barry Lyndon, Phantom Thread, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood exemplify that perfectly. You never once not believe you are in that moment of time. You never not believe you're in feudalist Japan. You never not believe you're in Barry Lyndon's fucking English, right?
Like Revolutionary War era, I think. Something like that.
Phantom Thread is like
some war where they had muskets.
Yeah. Early 1900s in London and in the countryside of Europe, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is 1969 in Hollywood. But the one movie I want to point out, it's not my winner, but it's kind of my outlier, is Cries and Whispers, because it is a period piece to some degree, but it's also so much smaller than all the other movies I named. It's just about a few women, a few sisters, and their housekeeper in a house. It's just a few characters, but they all have such distinct outfits, and the production design and stuff plays into this too, where because you are only in one main location and a couple other ones, like you have to make sure you have to build that world properly. If you're going to be in one place, you got to make it an interesting place to spend an hour and a half. And Cries and Whispers is so specifically chosen. The characters are brought to life by their crazy red, like they wear these crazy red dresses and stuff. The certain rooms in the house are just bright red. So that's why I wanted to recognize that one, because sometimes it's a lot harder to be specific and have to make a decision for one character. Like in all these other movies, they're changing. Like if a costume isn't the best, don't worry, they're gonna be in something else soon. But Cries and Whispers is a lot more personal, a lot smaller than that.
Yeah. Some of my nominees, I tended to go for more over the top costumes, if you will. But I guess I went for things that were maybe a little more iconic, maybe jumped off the screen more. For example, like Planet of the Apes and Star Wars, right? Not your period piece costumes there, but like for me, Planet of the Apes, it's such an integral piece to the movie, right? Like if the apes looked bad, it would be really difficult to watch. And it's not that they look particularly lifelike either, but I think like the ape costumes in general, and it didn't win costume design, but it was nominated. But like those talking faces, and they got the job done at the end of the day, and they felt real enough to me to watch the film. That I actually really like the way they look. I like that they're not like completely lifelike, but they're not ridiculous looking at the same time. Star Wars, I mean, what's more iconic than a stormtrooper, right? But also Chewbacca. Like Chewbacca is a great costume. Yoda, even though he's like a Darth Vader, like Yoda, even though he's a little goofy fucker, like Yoda's iconic. The Last Emperor, there was a film that I watched in the past week or so in preparation for this, because it had like 8 or 9 Oscar nominations. It won Best Picture. So I was thinking like, oh, I got to watch this. It's going to have a bunch of nominations. I will say I was a little let down by The Last Emperor. I didn't quite understand how it won so many Oscars, but I think the best part of that film is the costumes. They're in the Forbidden City, and they're wearing really cool like cloaks and stuff. So I did like that. The Grand Budapest Hotel, I mean, just pops of color. And like so much about Wes Anderson films is the vibe, and the vibe with the costume fits. And that leads us up to our unanimous winner. And I think this, other than The Lord of the Rings, which we did pick 2 different films, this is our only truly unanimous winner from what I can recall.
Kind of. There's another thing later.
Oh no, there is another thing later. Okay, sorry. It's not our only unanimous winner, but our first truly unanimous winner is Phantom Thread. And what can be said? I mean, to me, why I chose Phantom Thread, which on its own is a wonderful movie. Fucking love Phantom Thread and Daniel Day-Lewis. But to me, at the end of the day, when the movie itself is about the costumes that are in the movie, like that's what I mean. Yes, it's a love story. It's about the 2 of them, but
no,
he's a
dressmaker. Story, it's the world. Yeah, world.
He's a dressmaker, and the costumes look. I just remember watching it, and you almost like a part of you is like, oh, I want to do that. Like I want to be Reynolds Woodcock and design these dresses. That's how cool it was in my eyes.
No, yeah, for the movie to work, you have to be swept off your feet, just like every person that walks into that house. woman that's looking for a dress in the House of Woodcock, you kind of need to believe that he is the best dressmaker in London, because if that fact doesn't work, everything else falls apart around it. And it's a movie about clothes. It's a movie about people that make the clothes and how important the clothes are. So when the expectations in the world is setting the standard so high, saying this guy is the best, this guy is a legend, et cetera, you have to believe that. And
Mm-hmm.
not for 1 second do you not believe it in Phantom Thread.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving right along, because we have a lot more categories to get
This
through.
was my toughest category.
We are approaching the halfway mark here. Yeah. The next two are both of the screenplay categories were, I think, the toughest. Even last night, I switched out a few of these nominees and put new ones in, switched around my winners several times. It was arduous making the decision. So let's start with Best Original Screenplay. My nominees are Get Out, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Inglourious Bastards, 8.5, and Fargo.
My nominees are Network by Patty Chayefsky. It won in 1976. Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing in 1989. Charlie Kaufman's Being John Malkovich in 1999. Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia in 99 as well. And then Todd Field's Tar.
Which I rewatched yesterday, by the way.
What are your second viewing thoughts?
It's very interesting on a second viewing, because the first time you watch it, it's, I guess, like more fantastical. You're not quite sure what's going on. And then I think the second time around, it reads more as like a character study. And I mean, it's always a character study, but I think the second time around, you really see into the intricacies of Lydia Tarr and can form more of an opinion about what goes on in her life and her as a character.
No, exactly. Like,
fantastic.
It's a huge movie, so the first time you watch any huge movie, you're kind of just absorbing it and trying to understand how it moves and how
and
it
you've
feels.
done some like reading in between people's opinions on it.
But I agree. The second time I saw Tar, it totally changed for me. Similarly to Phantom Thread, actually. Like the first time I watched Phantom Thread, I was like, wow, great movie. Got kind of crazy at the end. But then the second time you watch it and the third time,
you're
and
like,
the fourth
this is
time,
5 stars.
Not just that, but it's like changes from like a really dark romance to a straight up comedy. And I think Tar does a similar thing. Like Tar is so fucking funny, and you don't really realize it I mean, it's still funny the first time, but there's so many layered looks and moments, and the reason I nominated Tar is because of how impressive the subtext is. So many movies tell you what's going on and make sure you understand the character and their motivations and where they come from and what is going on in their heads. And Tar makes you do the work. It makes you think about what they're doing off screen. It makes you think about what they're thinking. It makes you wonder, oh, specifically like with the wife, like there's a moment with the Tar's wife later on in the movie where she gets mad at Lydia for not telling her what's going on, not because of Lydia's actions, not because of the horrible things she does to people, but because their family could have gotten maimed from it. Their family could have gotten some dirt on them from it, and that she wanted the respect and the time to try and like solve it with Lydia. It's not about being mad at Lydia for being a horrible person. It's literally like, hey, we're a team, you should have gave me a heads up. And it makes you start to think, oh, what does her wife get out of this? What advantages is her wife getting in that orchestra and in that system? And you think about that with every character. What do they get? It's all about like what they're getting out of it.
It's
and what
very
they
political.
want. It's so political, and it's not overt. It's not characters screaming at each other. It's them manipulating one another and them playing mind games with one another. And it's so fucking fascinating and impressive. So yeah, Tar kicks ass, and it's honestly really hard for me not to pick Tar. I'm so high on Tar for 1,000 reasons, and one of them is how fucking crazy tight that script is and how insane the ending is.
Yeah. I will say, outside of Pinocchio, it was tough for me to choose films from this year, just with the recency. I like to sit with it more and think about like how I feel about a film a year from now, 2 years from now. But
No,
you
definitely.
seem very moved by Tar right off the bat, so
I
very
was high.
deserving nomination.
I was high on Todd Field to begin with before I saw
Yeah.
Tar, and Tar kind of just cemented how fucking. Um, it's crazy. The man only has 3 movies, and he's operating on a similar level as Paul Thomas Anderson, Quentin Tarantino, uh, our best filmmakers.
Hmm.
Is there
So
any?
I want to
Yeah.
ask you about Being John Malkovich,
Okay.
because I think originally, from what I recall, you had adaptation in there, did you not?
No, because
You
it's an
had
adaptation.
Oh, sorry, that's it. That's adapted screenplay. Okay, I didn't scroll down far enough. All right, well, never mind, because I was gonna ask about that, because I prefer adaptation to Being John Malkovich, which was a film that I didn't fully get into. So tell me why you love it so much.
I guess for me, with all these movies, it's about point of view and originality. Um, I guess to go through them all quick, Network is a crazy media parable about prophecy and politics and like media consumption and a thousand other things. Do the Right Thing is a racial parable, one of the most powerful and effective ever told, in my opinion. Being John
Hmm.
Malkovich is a perfect surrealist journey. It's not for everyone, and I totally respect that. It's a weird fucking movie, but it's so specific and so thoughtfully created. Like the the half floor they find that they can go into the small door that goes into John Malkovich's mind for a little bit before it spits you out into the next to a freeway somewhere in New York or New Jersey or whatever. It's like a really touching, sad, heartbreaking story about, again, about like purpose, about like um going after your goals, about greed and being envious of others who are doing what you want to do or have the recognition that you want. Um, he's doing a lot here in terms of like both like what makes an artist and why artists work, and also just the way he's telling this really crazy story.
Hmm. All right, want me to go through mine?
Yeah, do it.
All right. So yeah, I had to give love to Get Out, because I think when I try and think of screenwriting, I think trying to think of like the great minds and ingenuity, right? So like Charlie Kaufman's a great example of that. Like there's nobody out there like him. And so, Get Out is what really kicked off things for Jordan Peele, and was this great example of, I think, one of the freshest ideas we've seen in a long time with screenwriting. So that's why I nominated that. Similarly with Fargo, I think there's nobody out there like the Coen brothers. And for me, Fargo, I didn't understand the Coen brothers at first. When I watched a few of their films, it was not for me. And then I watched Fargo, and it unlocked everything. It's just so smart the way they're writing this film, where there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of nothingness sort of in there, but it's so impactful at the same time. And then Inglorious Bastards, we spoke about it a little bit earlier. Just that one for me as a film is just so hard hitting from start to finish. And Tarantino put in like 10 years of writing that script, and it just hits the nail on the head every beat along the way. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, I chose that because um for me, at the end of the day, right, a key piece to screenplays are the characters, right? It's about how well you write these characters. And I think Butch Cassidy and Sundance are two of the greatest characters ever put to film, and one of the great duos ever put to film. Um, and talk about an ending as well. I mean, such a key component. But my winner is 8.5. and it's actually 8.5 is not my favorite Fellini film, but it is the screenplay that I'm most impressed with. Um, just because I feel like it's a film you could watch 100 times and take away something different every single time. It's so interpretive. It's always leaves you thinking, because essentially, and I'm quoting this from my Letterboxd review that I left when I watched the film for the first time. It's a film within Fellini's mind, within his past, within a film again, within another film. Like it's never ending, and it's so introspective about him and filmmaking in general. Um, it's hard to put to words what that film really is, and that's why I gave the win to 8.5 for screenplay. I
I
just
gotta
think it's a
watch it.
masterclass.
And you're basically saying kind of what I was going for with my nominees is
Sure.
it's so there's so many great screenplays, but the ones I chose, I felt like were able to create a very specific world. The world of Network is the world of media and news and television. And Do the Right Thing, it's just it's Bed-Stuy, right? They're in Bed-Stuy.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a very specific version of Bed-Stuy. It's almost like Shakespearean or like there's a very classical divide of like a group versus another and Do the Right Thing, but it's very modern at the same time. Being John Malkovich, like I said, it's a fucking specific surrealist. It's so realistic until it's not, and that's
Mm-hmm.
why Being John Malkovich stands above the rest for me. Tar is a really realistic world. Oh, not really. It's like a
Depends
fairy
who you
tale
ask.
because
Yeah.
there's
It's
no
like a dream.
there's no female conductors. So that in and of itself, making the main character a world renowned conductor when there are no there's no like I mean there's famous female conductors, that's not what I'm saying, but like in the Berlin harmonic or the what is it called, the harmonic, right?
Philharmonic, but yeah,
Philharmonic, they've never had a woman conductor. So to make
I don't
Lydia
know.
Tarr, no, they haven't.
Okay.
uh, but to make Lydia Tarr the first one is a fairy tale, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why I
EGOT winner.
that's what, yeah, you got shit like that, just building a
Yeah.
character even if they're fictional, but to spend so much time building them and making them true. um and to talk about one of your movies, Inglorious Bastards, like that's a fairy tale too. I love this alternative history that Tarantino has played with a couple times, Once Upon a Time in the Hollywood and Inglorious Bastards, because he plays in a real playground, Charles Manson's in the backdrop of Hollywood or Nazi occupied France, but he gives them happy endings in a way that make you think about history and think about the characters and think about the world and the relationships. And that's why I picked Magnolia as my winner.
I never understood those frogs falling from the sky.
Now it took me quite a bit of time, but and it was between like choosing this and Boogie Nights, because fucking
Mm,
Boogie Nights is incredible too, and so
yeah.
tight, so tight and smart and funny.
Yeah.
Um, but Boogie Nights is Goodfellas, and that's but this is also Robert Altman's Shortcuts. I don't know if you're aware of how like influenced he is by those
No.
movies or these people, but like Shortcuts is also a tapestry of Los Angeles where people are connected by their pain and their past and all these things, and then they all come together with a disaster at the end. In Shortcuts, it's an earthquake, and in Magnolia, it's frogs falling from the sky. Um, but Magnolia is just so impressive. You can argue the movie doesn't work or it's too long or bloated or he's trying to do too much, but that's why I love it. He's putting every idea and feeling he has at the moment into that movie. Um, the way every character connects to one another, every storyline slowly evolves into being one big one is so impressive. It gives you everything you want from John C. Riley is kind of like a loser cop trying to get a date with a woman that's addicted to drugs and was basically abused and tortured by her father, seeing who her father is, his state of mind right now, his guilt, the kid that's on the game show with the debt. Like, it's so meticulous, it's so plotting, it's so exact, but it's so big and human and personal. Like, I've never watched a movie that felt like the world was ending and everyone was dying, but it was just because of their personal relationships and not because of some outside force. It's just kind of an amazing movie, and it's a miracle that it was actually ever made. Now, I'll just go into the best adapted now too. This is where it gets even messier because one, I haven't read all the screenplays I nominated for
Yeah.
best original. I've looked at Network and I've looked at Being John Malkovich online, but I'm just going by the movie and the story for the other ones. For Best Adapted, I did my best to have some relationship with the original source material. So I've read Clockwork Orange, the novel by Anthony Burgess. The screenplay was by Stanley Kubrick in 1971. I've read Stephen King's novella The Body, and it was adapted into a screenplay, Stand By Me, by Bruce Evans and Reynold Gideon in 1986. Charlie and Donald Kaufman adapted Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean in 2002. The movie's called Adaptation that Mike mentioned before.
A little spoiler there.
Sacha Baron Cohen, Peter Bainham, Anthony Hines, Dan Mazer, Todd Phillips, they're all credited for adapting Borat in 2006. And in 2014,
Adapting it from what?
It was a segment on the
Ali
Ali
G.
show.
Okay. Yeah.
And PTA adapted Inherent Vice, which is a novel by Thomas Pynchon in 2014. I nominated Clockwork Orange because of how faithful it is for the most part to the novel. It has a famous last chapter that Stanley Kubrick did not include in his version of the movie, and that it's kind of like a divisive thing for fans of the book that Stanley Kubrick did not include the final chapter because it kind of changes the way you think about the character and stuff. Stand By Me is impressive to me because it's just a short story. It's a novella that they expanded into a much bigger, more heartfelt, emotionally driven movie. Borat is my fourth spot.
Which, by the way, I love the Borat nomination. I think it's great. It was on my short list.
There were some fluctuations with my fourth spot, but I ended up going with Borat because they are telling a scathing analysis of America with one of the funniest characters ever made. There's just some straight up amazing comedy bits in the movie, but for me, Borat is important because of all the exploration of America. Sacha Baron Cohen isn't American; he's British, and I think that gives him a really unique lens to look at us through. He has no personal attachment to the American flag or like our Constitution or like what we were taught growing up about how great America is or whatever. He's able to literally set us on fire and tell us everything wrong with us, and he does in that movie. Inherent Vice, I own the script. Actually, I could go grab it if I wanted to.
It's okay.
And I flipped through the script, but the reason I nominated it without reading Thomas Pynchon's book is because of how famously unadaptable Pynchon is. Pynchon is a crazy writer in the way he uses perspective and detail and what he decides to focus on and not focus on. And I think the fact that PTA was able to translate the dreaminess, the drug hazed adventure of Inherent Vice. We're solving a mystery, kind of. We're investigating things, figuring out what people are doing. But there's so much more going on, and you're getting lost in all the other stuff. PTA does like a flawless job bringing that feeling to life.
So,
Mike, who are your nominees?
And can I just say, I do love your nominees. Although I don't like Clockwork Orange as a movie, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's like
I know.
it's
I
so
haven't read the
nasty.
book.
No, no, not even that. The movie is so nasty and shit.
Yeah.
Like the first time I watched it in college, I had to turn it off. I was a freshman in
Hmm.
college. I started it. I said, this is horrible.
Yeah.
Why would I want to be in this world?" And it wasn't
Hmm.
until a few years later where I watched it where I was like in it for all the societal
Yeah.
shit like that, whatever. But the book, just going on best adapted screenplay, the fact that he did adapt it pretty faithfully with the language, like Anthony Burgess made up a whole language for these fucking
Hmm.
crazy droog characters. Like it's not just the fact that it's a faithful adaptation, it's a faithful adaptation plus he honored the world that Anthony Burgess built.
Yeah. And that's a key distinction, right? Because for me, when I was thinking of best adapted screenplay, I think faithfulness is important, but it's not everything, right?
Not at
Because we're
all.
adapting it from a book to a film. So, you know, in all of my nominees, I don't know the source material. Some I do, and so I like to identify what are the key differences, and I rewarded these films because I think the changes the directors made were or the screenwriters made was imperative to the success of the film compared to the book. But others, I don't know the source material for all of these, so I was just going based off of I think if the end product is good, if the screenplay is great, then they must have done at least a good job adapting it from whatever the source material was. So my nominees are The Godfather, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, Casablanca, 12 Angry Men, and Brokeback Mountain. So
Now, are
both
these all books? Is like what is the original source material? I
I
think the
be- I
I only
believe
say that because
most of them are books. So Godfather, Lord of the Rings is a book. I think Brokeback Mountain is maybe a short story. I think Casablanca is either a book or a short story. 12 Angry Men is a teleplay.
that's what I was gonna say. I thought
It's
it
a
was either a
teleplay.
play or a TV movie, right?
Yes. Yep. Um so The Godfather and The Lord of the Rings are books that I have read, and that's why I nominated them, is because I've seen the source material and I know how difficult it is, but also just at the end of the day, they're two amazing screenplays. I mean, the story and the characters in The Godfather, um, come on, it's the greatest film of all time. Certainly one of them you could argue. Um, The Return of the King, I nominated that because, and really for all three Lord of the Rings films, that was like famously a very difficult undertaking. People tried for years to get the rights to make these films. Tolkien wrote the Lord of the Rings back, in the 40s and 50s, and was very protective of it. And there's just so much source material there, and Middle Earth is such a huge place that it's a huge undertaking, I think, to put that on screen. And there were cuts that were made. They couldn't include everything. But I think, at the end of the day, it's one of the greatest stories of good versus evil and friendship. And the characters are fantastic. And just the way that it all culminates together in The Return of the King, I think is absolutely wonderful. Um, Brings me to tears every time. Casablanca is a film that I just continually grow admiration for, and perhaps one of the greatest love stories of all time, but also like really powerful anti-war film too. And I just love the scene where they sing La Marseillaise, the French national anthem at Rick's bar in front of all of the Germans. I mean, like you can't. I mean, you can make that shit up because they wrote it, but like you almost can't. Like that's how iconic it is. And again, one of the all-time great film endings. And then Brokeback Mountain, what I was talking about earlier, about the importance of writing characters with screenplays. I have a love theme going on in this category a little bit, because Brokeback Mountain is one of the most devastating love stories that there ever was. And so that's why I wanted to give it a nomination. But my winner is 12 Angry Men. Um, I it, 12 Angry Men is one of the few films where, upon first viewing, I've been completely taken aback by. It's a short list. 12 Angry Men, Apocalypse Now, Singing in the Rain, all very different films, but all films that have just like really opened up my mind to another world. And for me, 12 Angry Men, what makes it such a powerful screenplay is you have the whole film, because it's a based off of a play or a teleplay, right? It's just these jurors in one room the entire time. So it's living and dying on the dialogue and what's said and how these characters are acting. And it's so much more than just this trial, right? It's societal, it's political. Um, it's so clever, and it really just has you thinking the entire time. And I think juror number 8 is just one of my favorite characters ever. So for that reason, I chose 12 Angry Men.
It's I wish I watched it this week because I was like, oh, it's short. I should watch it. I've always wanted to. It's just one of those movies like that I've never seen and everyone says is either super important or just straight up amazing, but
Mm-hmm.
it didn't happen this week. Um my winner's adaptation by
I'm and
Charlie what?
Can I just say adaptation? I'm really glad you picked this because it was like number 6 or 7. Like it just got caught with my nominations.
To me, it's everything. It's I mean that's the point of the movie, right? Is
Yeah.
Charlie Kaufman, played by Nick Cage, is adapting The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean into a movie. That's what the movie is about. The movie is about adapting a script. And the fact that we only get snippets of the book or what the book movie would be is what makes it so interesting. Is Charlie Kaufman in real life is struggling so hard to adapt this book into a movie that he's like, fuck it, that's the story. That's more interesting than the book anyway. I don't know if he actually thought that, but I think that's just like the path he decided to go down. And it's just fascinating. You get this dichotomy with Charlie, played by Nick Cage, which is kind of like a loser, down on his luck screenwriter, and then his like happier, chummier twin brother Donald, who is credited for the screenplay but isn't a real person in real life, which is really funny to me. Who is like writing like action schlock and like blockbuster type mainstream general audience crowd pleasing movies. And the that's what Charlie grapples with in the movie, right? Is he doesn't want to he doesn't want to follow tropes and archetypes. He doesn't want to be predictable. His goal in the beginning is to just straight up adapt the book. But as the story progresses and as these characters learn more about themselves and each other, the movie takes a logical turn. Whereas, like, as I'm explaining this, if you've never seen it, it's probably like, how the fuck did they end this movie? And that's probably what Charlie Kaufman was thinking the whole time as he was writing it. Like, okay, I strayed so far away from this. How do I end it? And he ends it perfectly. He falls into the trap of giving it a generic Hollywood ending. It's violent. It's like an action set piece in the swamps of Florida. People are shooting and chasing each other. There's backroom deals. The author of the book ends up falling in love with her subject, who is like the subject of the Orchid Thief. That never happened to Susan Orlean, and Charlie Kaufman had to like present it to her like, hey, I use you as a character. I make you do certain things that you would never do in real life. I know you didn't fuck the guy that you were studying for, years writing this book. I know you didn't do that, but that's where I had to bring the story to make it make sense, I guess. Like, he put the romance at the end. He gave it action. He put suspense and some thrills. And it's the first time I watched it, it's like why I didn't like the movie. I was in high school and I was like, oh, he made it generic, but that's the point. Like, I just totally didn't get it. Like, I was like, oh, it got boring towards the end, but no, it became the movie at the end. It became an adaptation. It's just brilliant for every reason. Being John Malkovich is brilliant. There's a scene in the movie where Nick Cage as Charlie Kaufman visits the set of Being John Malkovich because Charlie Kaufman wrote both movies. So it's very meta and it's very introspective, and that's why I like it. It's just very human and raw.
Yeah, it's by far my favorite Charlie Kaufman film. And before we move on, I forgot to mention that, funny enough, out of all of my nominees, they all are Oscar winners except 12 Angry Men. But got its official Oscar win today by yours truly. I bet you they're real honored that I gave it to him.
Oh yeah, everyone's clapping in their graves probably.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting more technical again. We're getting into
I love this category though.
The fine arts of filmmaking. Again, a tough category for me. You can. There's so many iconic scores out there. There's so much iconic music in movies. But what speaks to us? What speaks to you, Mike? I want to know.
Yeah, to me, this category is probably more personal than any other one because it's like your music taste, right? It's your score taste. And there's a technical ability to, right? Like score captures the feeling of a film. It has to fit. So there is that technical bit to it, but at the end of the day, like this is really a lot of personal preference. So
are you just judging the music, or are you looking at the movie too and how it works in the movie?
I'm looking at how it works in the movie.
Okay.
To me, all of my nominees, the movie would not be the same without the score.
Yeah, same.
Like there's a lot of movies out there that just have forgettable scores, and they're just fine. They're fine. But like these movies without the score are not the same at all. So my nominees are The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, scored by Howard Shore. The Godfather, scored by Nino Rota. Star Wars, scored by John Williams. E.T. the Extraterrestrial, also scored by John Williams. And The Hateful Eight, scored by Ennio Morricone. Dom, what are your nominees?
My nominees are John Williams' score for Jaws, which won in 1975. Bernard Herrmann's score for Taxi Driver in water burp. Taxi Driver, 1976. Danny Elfman's score for Men in Black in 1997. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's score for The Social Network, which won in 2010. And Johnny Greenwood's score for Phantom Thread in 2017.
So, again, like this was very difficult. Actually, this is the only category I think where I nominated a person twice. So John Williams, Star Wars, and E.T. And I also had Jaws on my short list. So I'm glad you chose Jaws in my stead. The reason why I went with Star Wars and E.T., Star Wars is just so iconic.
Mm-hmm.
For me, like that was the shoe in for John Williams. And then it was between E.T. and Jaws. And the reason why I went with E.T. is because I think E.T. has the better score throughout the film, and Jaws is made more by its main theme, I think, is the driving force behind that score. So that's why I chose E.T., which has quickly become one of my all-time favorite films in the last few years. Just like, you just hear da 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 da, and it like transports you to another planet, really. The Godfather is an interesting one because The Godfather, Nino Rota's nomination was actually revoked.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So if we want to play by the rules, I don't know if I can actually nominate it, in which case I would have to go for The Godfather Part 2. But Nino Rota's nomination for The Godfather was revoked because the love theme, which plays for the first time with Michael and Kay at Connie's wedding.
Mm-hmm.
The da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na.
That's probably my favorite piece of music from The Godfather.
Yeah.
But what about it?
So Nino Rota actually stole that or took it from the score from a 1958, I think, film called Fortunella. However, he also scored that film. So he stole it from himself. and it was slightly different. Like, it has a different tone, but the notes are essentially the same. I listened to it. It's pretty spot on. But my thought is, well, he wrote it, so give him credit. It's not like he ripped off somebody else. He stole it from himself. So I don't have an issue with it, and I think it's a wonderful score. So I did nominate it. Um the
I guess
Hateful
the
Eight.
word
Yeah, go
original
ahead.
is, I guess, just in the category title, best original score is what is
Yeah,
knocking it. If it was just best score, it'd be fine. But the fact it came from something else, I kind of understand it, but it's a little silly.
yeah.
I agree.
At the same time, I don't though, because Howard Shore, um, he won score for the Fellowship of the Ring and the Return of the King.
And
So
it's
like
all
I
the
had to
same
make
music.
well, hold on though, because I had to make that choice between those films what I wanted to nominate. And to a certain extent, parts of it is the same music. He does use similar themes in The Return of the King, and he does this thing which is called leitmotifs, where he takes every place in the Lord of the Rings has a different theme, right? So there's like a Mordor theme, there's a Rivendell theme, there's a Shire theme. And then he uses those themes later on in the film to evoke feeling. So when Sam and Frodo are in Mordor, towards the end of things, and they're full of despair, but they're thinking, but yo, do you remember the Shire, Sam? Do you remember the strawberries? And then you hear that Shire theme come in, but slightly different tone and feeling to it. So he does use similar music throughout those films. So it seems like a very odd argument to me, when it's the same person that's writing it. But I mean, I guess I understand it at the end of the day. But I do want to talk about the Hateful Eight for a second. This one for me,
Hell yeah, because this could be argued that it should have been revoked too, honestly.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Ennio Morricone used music from The Thing, which he also scored.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, it was like leftover music. It didn't make it in the thing, but still,
mhm,
he made it for the thing. So it was
yeah,
original to the thing and transposed over Hateful Eight. So it's again, it's a gray area.
yeah. And let me be clear. I actually don't think I love the score for the Eightful Eight. It's fantastic. It makes that film, but I don't think like alone I would nominate the Hateful Eight for like one of my top 5 favorite scores of all time. But
Okay.
I could not sit here and not nominate Ennio Morricone, who I think is the greatest composer of all time, and
Hmm.
who was absolutely snubbed time and time again after the Oscars. Hateful Eight is his only win, which is fucking ridiculous.
It's crazy.
Um, he was nominated for The Mission, which some people say is his best score. I think it's a great score.
I don't
I
even
don't
know
know,
that movie.
it just doesn't do it for me the same, to be honest. We talked about earlier Days of Heaven, but like the
It's
fact that he
fine.
didn't
Yeah.
the fact that he didn't get nominated for anything from the Dollars trilogy, Once Upon a Time in the West, Cinema Paradiso, like absolutely ridiculous. So I did have to give him a nomination for the Hateful Eight. Um, but for me, my favorite score of all time, we said this is a personal thing. I listen to this time and time again. And when I listen to it, just hearing it evokes the emotion for me that I watch on screen. And I can't imagine a sweeping fantasy epic like The Lord of the Rings without Howard Shore's score. I was also lucky enough to see it performed live with an orchestra while watching The Two Towers, which was a transcendental experience. So I'm going with The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring for my best score.
I think me and you were thinking similarly here. I had to go kind of with the there's an icon factor with some of this shit. That's why I chose Jaws. Like Jaws is so iconic, but it's also perfect for the movie. Jaws is not the same movie without that music. Same with Taxi Driver. The music in Taxi Driver makes Taxi Driver. It complements the cinematography so well. It's haunting, it's scary. It's not traditional score by any means. They're playing with different tones and depths in there that I can't even explain because I'm not a music guy, but I just know it's different. When you hear the Taxi Driver score, you just know something's off with it and something's wrong, and that's exactly what the movie is. There's something wrong with this motherfucker. There's something this guy's gonna snap, and the music builds that up in a perfect way. You can laugh at this one if you want, but I think Danny Elfman is a great composer. He works a lot, and not all of his shit is like snappy or like stands out. He works in the mainstream a lot. He has fucking Marvel movies under his belt. He has so much shit, but he also has a lot of the. I mean, he did the fucking Simpsons theme. Like he's also an icon, and Men in Black will always have a special place in my heart. I think it's a near perfect science fiction, like comic adventure, and that's what the music symbolizes. The music takes a lot of inspiration from like old Twilight Zone and old like 1950s and 60s science fiction mystery movies and like noir and B movies and exploitation movies, and it packages it up in this really fun poppy symphony. And I don't know, the Men in Black theme always kind of makes me smile. Phantom Thread, Johnny Greenwood has worked with PTA a few times.
That was on my short list.
I mean, Phantom Thread is just a beautiful score, beautiful score. It matches the movie, it accompanies the movie in a really delicate, perfect way. But also, if you just played the score, if you just played the music for Phantom Thread, or like Phantom Thread is a movie where I would just, if there were tickets to see an orchestra play the music from Phantom Thread, I would be there in a heartbeat. My winner though is The Social Network, and mostly because this is the movie that made me aware of score. Obviously, I watched movies forever with score. I watched Star Wars and would hum along the music and blah, 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 blah. But this is like one of the first scores I sought out to listen to alone, or that I was just playing while I was in the shower or doing my homework. I was 13, and Social Network was kind of like one of the first new movies that I like saw in theaters and was like, I don't know, like to me, Social Network is like a modern equivalent of like Citizen Kane in both the story and what they cover, but also just like how important that movie is. And obviously it's the movie that made everyone aware that Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails and Atticus Ross were capable of this shit. And now they are some of the most sought after popular composers we have in film. And I don't know, it's just, to me, The Social Network is iconic as any of the other ones. That trailer music, that it's just fucking so good. It's just like it Fincher is so plotting and exacting, and it's all about pace and build up and stuff. And just everyone is cooking, everyone is working together in such a great way, and that music accompanies that movie and really, really perfectly.
So our next category is, I teased this a little bit earlier, but this is I guess if I say what I'm going to, this is the last one where we have a unanimous winner. And I guess it's going to be
there's another one.
There's another one.
Kind of. But we'll get to it when we get to it. It's at the end.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's a kind of though. This is okay. My God, I'm really out of sorts today.
No, it's okay.
It'll give it away once we go through our nominations who the winner is, but this is a unanimous winner category. Best production design. My nominees are The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, The Godfather Part 2, The Grand Budapest Hotel, Star Wars, and Titanic.
Titanic. Okay.
Yeah, Titanic. Fuck yeah. I actually watched. So let's start with Titanic. Titanic was, I actually watched it for the first time in full when they just re-released it in theaters like a month ago.
Wait, did you see it in 3D?
Yeah.
How was that?
And it was fine. There's just no point to being in 3D. I didn't understand that.
Well, it's weird because it's like you're cutting out foreground subjects and it just kind of looks like a picture book. Like it pops out like a one of those pop-up children's books in a
Yeah, I
way.
will say the 3D wasn't as apparent in it, I guess, as it is in other films. Like it doesn't pop off the screen as much. But yeah, there was no point to it being in 3D. I didn't understand that whatsoever. But it was a film I saw for the first time in full like a month ago. I'd always like seen parts of it as a kid, and there's a lot that was familiar, but I was just amazed by the grand scale of it. And then I did some more research on sort of what James Cameron did building out those sets and recreating the ship and all of the historical accuracy they put into really matching the design of the not only the exterior but the interior of the ship, and just the grand scale they did shooting in the water. I was very impressed by Star Wars. I think really speaks for itself.
Mm-hmm.
What they did, building those sets, but also then like scaling the miniatures and all that. Sort of same thing with Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King.
Well, for Star Wars too, there's like Millennium Falcon, Death Star,
Yeah,
iconic shit that's because of the production design.
yeah,
X-wings, like
totally.
all the ships, like X-wings, TIE fighters and stuff like that. Those are iconic. You have children that know the names of an X-wing and TIE fighter because of the names and because of what they look like. Like
Hmm.
it's very smart how they created all that stuff.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. And sort of the same thing with the Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. Earlier I talked about how they so masterfully used visual effects to meld their production design with the physical world, and they did so much work building these cities that everything takes place in, and scaling. They built so many miniatures of different sizes of all of these places. And also just like the Shire is real. I can go to the Shire right now. It is real. It exists, and they built that. And I think I think that's amazing. Um The Godfather Part 2, because of this so many different places that film goes to, The Godfather 2 is so much bigger in scale than Godfather 1, which is already big in scale. But Godfather 2, I mean, they are uh, you know, Lake Tahoe. They're, going back in time in New York City with De Niro. They're in Cuba. They're in Florida. They're all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly credit there. And then the Grand Budapest Hotel. I mean, Wes Anderson, like we talked about earlier, is a vibe, has such a style that's so distinct, and it all starts with his set designs. I mean, they really make his films, and I love too in the Grand Budapest Hotel. Um, right, it's all about the hotel. It's all of, like the place is in the name, right? And we're just like we talked about earlier with the costume design. Like this is all about the place and the characters within that place. But I also love how they like he just decides to throw in a little bit of stop motion animation into the production of this film as well. So those are the reasons behind all of my nominees. I'll let you go through your nominees, and then people will soon find out who we decided is the unanimous winner here.
First up, I have Wizard of Oz from 1939, designed by Cedric Gibbons and William Horning. Next up, I have Seven Samurai from 1956. There was also like a color black and white separation in the 50s for production design. Soi Matsuyama designed Seven Samurai. Again with Psycho, it was a black and white nominee from 1960. Joseph Hurley and Robert Clatworthy were the production designers. George Milo was the set decorator. 2001: A Space Odyssey from 1968. Anthony Masters, Harry Lang, Ernest Archer, and Grand Budapest Hotel. Mike didn't mention their names, but the production designer was
Yeah, sorry.
Adam Stockhausen, and the set decorator was Anna Pinnock. It won in 2014. To me, it's a bit of like being iconic, but it's also about the world they're building. Wizard of Oz was the one I kind of like went back and forth on because
On
it's
whether or not to nominate it, or whether you were going
whether
to
or not to
name it the
nominate it.
winner. Okay.
Because it's very theatrical and like in a stage way. They're
Mm-hmm.
playing with like matte. I mean, a lot of old movies did this, but like the matte backgrounds and the painted backgrounds, but along with like how the sets were built and the way they shot the movie, it's very much old school Hollywood. Of course, it's 1939, but the production design also had to incorporate the flip to color in the movie. The movie
Mm-hmm.
starts in black and white, and then it becomes this colorful fantasy world that Dorothy explores. And just that first shot of her exiting the house in black and white and stepping out into Oz, where it's fucking the Technicolor is just fucking making your eyes bleed. It's still amazing. Like
Yeah.
I'm Wizard of Oz is a classic movie, and to me it's because of like the music and the sets, like the yellow brick road and the way it twinkles and shines and sparkles is just, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can't really ask for more when it comes to like a children's adaptation or like a world like that. Seven Samurai is just like so epic. The villages are so perfectly built. I feel like there's so much detail and accuracy in the way they built that world and the villages. I did a little research, and it's crazy how many like full-on villages they made for this movie, only to like straight up destroy them and set them on fire and run through horses and all
Mm-hmm.
this stuff. So just the scale of Seven Samurai and how, I don't want to say gritty, but there's like a certain kind of like there's a lot of dirt on Seven Samurai, and that's what makes it realistic. Psycho, just because the house is so iconic, like Psycho does not work without the Bates Motel, and the house like that sits on the hill beyond the hotel. That's why it got a nominee. And we kind of talked about this before with 2001, but just the spaceship and then the ending
Oh
scene
man.
after Stargate, the world where with the astronaut is the old man now and he's seeing himself, like it's, and the tiled floor, the white tiled floor, and the
Yeah. See, I
statues,
I think
the
about
marble details.
I think about when he's going for that jog, like around their
That too.
little space station thing, or like when he's in the tunnel. Um, yeah, that's a great one. 2001 was close for me. I'm glad you nominated it.
When he's in the hatch with Hal, like
Open the
the
pod bay doors, Hal.
like my I get distracted by the shiny lights of the ending, I think, but like
Mm-hmm.
the reason that movie works and partially why I nominated it is because of how realistic the spaceship
Yeah.
setting is. Um, no surprise, we only have one overlapping movie, and it is Grand Budapest Hotel. That's also what I chose to win. Um, Wes is known now for his like storybook style, or his like um yeah, I guess like storybook style. And this is the movie that I feel like really cemented that. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
miss like Darjeeling Limited and Royal Tenenbaums Wes Anderson, where it looked beautiful, but it was also very much character and emotion based. He's gotten away from that for whatever reason, and that's fine because he's such a technician. He's such like a great blocker and framer and filmmaker that I'm okay with him playing in these really colorful sandboxes that he's more attracted to now. French Dispatch, French Dispatch nominated for design? I don't think it was.
I don't think so either, because
Which
I feel like that would have been on my short list. I mean, that's a
I probably would have
great, yeah,
nominated that more than Grand Budapest,
yeah.
honestly.
You know which one I love by him, set design wise, is The Life Aquatic with
Oh
Steve
yeah, yeah,
Zissou.
of
Like when
course.
it's like the ship's cut in half and they go from room to room. Um, and the camera shows you that too. Like you see the dividing walls. It's awesome.
No, yeah. Just the way Wes played, you mentioned it, like the miniatures and the stop motion woven in with
Mm-hmm.
live action, and I don't know, it just has a very specific look um that I get lost in every time. I've only seen Grand Budapest a couple times, but every time I do, I just can't believe I just can't believe what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Best original song is funny because I've only seen one of these movies.
Really?
Yeah, I've only seen Magnolia. Um,
Wow. I
so
love
for
this category, by the way.
no,
Very
this is a good
excited about
one.
it.
Because it's just about the song. It's about the music. So I kind of was looking at it and what songs did I know and what songs do I like? And I like so many random original songs that were nominated, especially in like the 70s and 80s. There's a lot of good shit in there. Um,
Yeah. See, I had the opposite philosophy. I chose songs that I think they have an iconic place in their film, like an iconic scene or meaning. So I steered away. Like there was great songs that I'm just like I haven't seen the film, so I'm not gonna pick the song. You know, like Lionel Richie, "Endless Love," Stevie Wonder, "I Just Called to Say I Love You." Like those are fantastic songs. But I wasn't gonna pick them. I don't know what they mean to those films.
no, fair enough. I did not think like that at all.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna dive into it quick because I don't have too much to say about some of these. Um, In 1949, "Baby It's Cold Outside" by Frank Losser won for Neptune's Daughter. No one talks about Neptune's Daughter. I didn't even know "Baby It's Cold Outside" was a best original
Haven't heard of
song.
it.
I thought it was just a Christmas song that we've always
Yeah.
had. So that's why I picked it. I don't even like "Baby It's Cold Outside" that much, but
Oh, I
just
love
be
that. That might be my favorite Christmas song, actually.
really,
It's like top five.
it's good, but it's like good in a way that I just like know it's good, so I don't care too
Yeah.
much. But
You
that's
didn't
why
even pick White Christmas though.
oh yeah, true. I don't know. Something about this one like stands above. Maybe it's like
Okay.
maybe it's the controversy of it now or
Okay.
whatever. The next up I have "Days of Wine and Roses." Music by is it Mancini or Mancini?
Technically, it's Mancini, but I think people say Mancini.
"Days of Wine and Roses," music by Henry Mancini, lyrics by Johnny Mercer. It won in 1962.
Is that the
Uh,
name of the song and the film?
Yep. Same with the next
Okay.
one, "9 to 5" by Dolly Parton in 1980. Amy Mann sang and music and lyrics by Amy Mann in "Save Me." It's a song featured in Magnolia in 1999. And then "It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp" by Fraser Boy, Juicy J, and DJ Paul from Hustle and Flow in 2005. Um, it's hard out here for a pimp. I picked just because it's a badass fucking 3 6 Mafia song that won an Academy Award and was made for this movie about a fictional gangster slash rapper. I've never seen Hustle and Flow, so just the fact that I'm so aware of the song and I've heard like when it was first nominated, I heard it so much. That it's hard out here for pimp. It was playing on commercials and so much. So I just feel like I don't know. It just stuck with me for some reason, and just the fact that 3 6 Mafia are Academy Award winners. I wanted to show some recognition for that. Amy Mann is kind of like a Fiona Apple contemporary, very much lyric based. She's very much a songwriter. "Save Me" is a beautiful song. I listen to it all the time when it comes on shuffle. Um, 9 to 5, again, bigger than the movie. I know people really like that movie. It's kind of like a classic 80s movie, but I think the song has kind of evolved past it. And real quick, my winner is "Days of Wine and Roses" for a really silly reason, and that's just because Better Call Saul uses it in in a trailer for the final season. It's not this version of it, but it's a cover only like 10 years later or something. It's not like a modern cover, but just the fact that it originated through the original song category, and I love it so much because of the Better Call Saul association. That's why it's my winner.
Fair enough. Yeah, totally different philosophies here, which I respect. I was considering just picking my favorites, but um my five nominees are Moon River by Henry Mancini from the film Breakfast at Tiffany's, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head by Burt Baccarat from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Also featured in Spider-Man 2.
Okay, well, whatever.
Well, no, I think that's funny. Like
Okay,
it's another Oscar Academy
fair
Award
enough.
nominated movie.
Fair enough. I've Had the Time of My Life by John DeNicola from Dirty Dancing. Skyfall by Adele from Skyfall, and Mystery of Love by Sufjan Stevens from Call Me by Your Name. Um, so let's start with Mystery of Love. That is maybe my favorite song in general from this list.
It's funny.
Um,
I was real close to picking. I was so when I first saw it, I was like, okay, this is my winner.
yeah,
And then
wow.
it didn't even end up making the
Then
list after
yeah,
I kept going through it. But I love this song too. It's
I
so good.
love this song and I love that film. And part of the reason why I nominated is because I wanted Call Me by Your Name to be nominated for something. I almost gave it a screenplay nom, but I'll give it this one. Skyfall I chose because and this was a tough choice between Skyfall and Live and Let Die by Paul McCartney, but
Ooh,
I wanted a Bond song represented because I think like that's such an iconic thing, like the opening credit to a Bond film, and to have that original song. I actually think the best Bond song is Goldfinger by Shirley Bassey. But that was not nominated. I don't know if it was original or not, but it wasn't nominated. I
why'd
went
you
with
pick?
Sky
Yeah, why'd you pick Skyfall?
because to me, sounding wise, like to me, Live and Let Die was always just like a great Paul McCartney song that I really loved.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like I think it can exist outside of the film, but like Skyfall, like you listen to it, Skyfall's like cinematic sounding. And I also think Skyfall is just a better film than Live and Let Die. Like it kind of sucks that like a great song is wasted on a mediocre film. Like Live and Let Die is not very good.
That's the
Um,
one where it's like it's not really about a supervillain, right? He's like trying to figure out a drug problem or like there's
yeah,
it's
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 weird.
it's like an it's yeah, it is weird.
The only thing I remember from Live and Let Die is like he jumps like on alligators or some shit across a river. Um, but now these next three are really have their place in the sort of like iconic scenes in film. I mean, The Time of My Life, that's Dirty Dancing. That
Mm-hmm.
makes the film. It's something that everybody remembers. How I've watched that scene from Dirty Dancing probably 100 times. I've never even seen the film, but I've seen the scene of that song and that dance. Moon River, I saw Breakfast at Tiffany's for the first time a few months ago, and then like a month ago in 35 millimeter, I saw or no, I'm sorry, I saw Breakfast at Tiffany's in 35 millimeter. My first experience with Audrey Hepburn was Roman Holiday. I've watched those both in the last couple of months. I've become obsessed with her. And it's just Moon River. Like I've been listening to that nonstop ever since I've seen the film. Like have not stopped. And I keep singing it to myself like all day long, driving everybody nuts. But my all-time favorite is Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. That's my winner. Paul Newman riding around on the bike, getting chased by the cow is just like the perfect little like it's just thrown into the film. It's just like this scene with that song. They're having fun. It's a break from everything else going on. Um, I love it. I love that's all I can say. I love it.
No, it's an awesome song. I almost picked it too. It's funny because it is like a break away from the movie.
Yeah,
And
totally.
for as I feel like that scene is almost like iconic in a way with the bike and everything. And the song just complements it so well.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
All right.
All right,
Well,
we're in the home
now
stretch here.
we are getting to the big ones now. Best director.
Now, I had a some method to my madness here.
This is
And
tough. Very
these
tough.
these aren't all my favorite movies. It would have been too easy for me to pick Paul Thomas Anderson and Tarantino for certain things, Martin
Yeah,
Scorsese, blah blah blah. Um, I kind of and this argument goes for them too, but I wanted to showcase things that were important to me that don't always get talked about. Um,
sure.
so these are basically what I would say only these filmmakers could have made this movie. John Cassavetes, Woman Under the Influence, 1974. David Lynch, Blue Velvet, 1986. Spike Jones, Being John Malkovich, 1999. David Fincher, Social Network, 2010. Terrence Malick, Tree of Life, 2011. I'm going to go in reverse order quick. Terrence Malick's Tree of Life like I said, it's a dream. Uh, it's so visionary, and it's so provocative in a way that it's provocative because it's so honest about family and about what life used to be like, and how trauma can follow you and sink its teeth into you and be with you until you're an old man. And I think Malick understands the human condition better than most directors, and it's funny to see him kind of do the tree of life thing with movies after this, like Song to Song and To the Wonder and Knight of Cups. I don't know if you're familiar with any of those movies. One's like a country music drama. The other is like Christian Bale as a screenwriter, but they're just rehashing all of the same ideas he already perfected in Tree of Life. And I would argue movies like Days of Heaven and Thin Red Line too. Um, David Fincher, Social Network. Only David. This movie could have been made, but it would have just been a corny corporate, this is how it was made story. Aaron Sorkin, I almost nominated Aaron Sorkin for best adapted screenplay too, because I read most of that Accidental Billionaires book because I love this movie so much when I was in junior high or whatever. But I realized later on that the movie is so tight and exacting, not because of the script. If it was just Aaron Sorkin, it would have been a little bloated, a little more runny, a little wider. But David Fincher coming in and telling Aaron Sorkin, no, no, cut this. He shouldn't say this. Shorten this. Blah blah blah. Reining him in. It's one of the great cinematic partnerships we've had. Usually writers write, they pass it off, they step away, but the working relationship between these two sounded really interesting, almost tumultuous at times, but it resulted in one of the smartest, quickest, wittiest scripts we've had. So that's why I'm kind of crediting David Fincher with that, because only he could have made a movie that moved like that. And it was about the creation of Facebook. Like the story about the creation of Facebook is more
Yeah.
suspenseful and tension filled than most fucking thrillers that come out these days. Um, Spike Jones for being John Malkovich is kind of a gray one because Charlie Kaufman could have made all of his own movies. I kind of wish he was able to, but the Spike Jones Charlie Kaufman partnership is just one of the under one of the more understated ones we've ever had. And Spike Jones just understands surrealism and dreams and wonder, but also the human condition, like some of these other directors. David Lynch has, I mean, David Lynch is David Lynch, you know. And I chose Blue Velvet because I think he was also nominated for Mulholland Drive. But I chose Blue Velvet because of the world. It's such a specific look at suburbia and the hell that's underneath it, how gross the secrets people very close to you are hiding. Also, the cinematography, the color, the character expression, the way people speak, the reactions, the screams. That's why David Lynch is David Lynch, because he knows how to push people, and he knows what he wants, and he knows who he can get it from. That's why he's one of our best directors. And then my winner, John Cassavetes, A Woman Under the Influence. It goes back to something I've talked about a couple times in other categories, but I want real shit from my movies. I love all sorts of movies. I love adventures. I love leaving the planet. I love making up worlds. But there's nothing more impressive to me than just a devastating movie set in a town or a house or with people that you know. Like every character in a John Cassavetes movie, besides maybe like Gloria and Killing of a Chinese Bookie, maybe everything else, Husbands, Opening Night, what's it called,
Love Streams.
Love Streams. All these movies are so personal, so raw, so open, and it's because John Cassavetes is just very aware of the plight humans go through in their minds. Like, we don't talk about it enough, but just like the narratives that we put in our minds that make us crippled or anxious or sad or whatever, like that's as real as what's really going on outside of it. And I don't know, he's just he tells beautiful stories in a really devastating way. And even the characters you hate, you empathize with and you feel sorry for. And yeah, I don't know. John Cassavetes, he actually has an award. I forget what it's through. Oh, the Independent Spirit Awards. I think they have a John
Yes,
Cassavetes
yeah.
Awards, and people are saying this is just it's so fucking annoying. There's this narrative over the last week that low budget filmmaking is exploitative and abusive to the crew, and it's like, no, people need to be making low budget movies. People need to making no budget movies because of
Hmm.
these stories just need to be told. Like, if a person doesn't want to work on it, they don't have to. But that's such a silly made up argument anyways. Like, he was making such important movies for such a long time that in the excess of Hollywood and the excess of storytelling in movies and how big a movie should be, he was overlooked for such a long time, but by like normal people, I would say. And I don't know, nothing touches me more than a John Cassavetes movie, and Woman Under the Influence is probably my favorite one.
It's really funny because I think our philosophy on this category is maybe more different than it has been for any other one, right? You went for maybe the less obvious choices, the more fringe names. Not that any of these guys are really fringe. I mean, they're all acclaimed directors within their own rights, but they're not necessarily the mainstream names. Whereas I went a little bit more mainstream. I really rewarded just some of my favorite films ever. It's tough for me to really look at the intricacies of directing, because I think at the end of the day, right, like the success of the entire film falls onto the shoulders of the director, right?
For
And
sure.
it's their vision. So I also treated this sort of a little bit like a lifetime achievement award, in the sense that um for these guys, I first started by really like picking the name and then picking my favorite film of theirs, right? Like
Oh, okay.
Federico Fellini, it's tough for me to say, did he do a better job directing La Dolce Vita, or did he do a better job directing 8.5? I don't know. They're both fantastic. My favorite
Mm-hmm.
is La Dolce Vita. That's what I'm nominating. So my nominees are Federico Fellini for La Dolce Vita, Stanley Kubrick for 2001: A Space Odyssey, Francis Ford Coppola for The Godfather, Martin Scorsese for The Irishman, and Peter Jackson for The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. Um, Federico Fellini, I'll start there. La Dolce Vita. Um, that film is, in its essence, it's the name of the film, right? The Sweet Life. And he really explores, what does that mean to live the sweet life? It's about love. It's about religion. It's about infidelity. It's about spirituality. Um, and it's really like this big party almost. Like, it's a very grandiose film. It's eclectic. You have Marcello Mastroianni giving a fantastic performance. And it's a film you could keep returning to. And much like 8.5, but in very different ways. Like 8.5 is this very speculative film, and there's a lot of interpretation. Whereas I feel like with La Dolce Vita, you can take different meaning from it. It's more emotional. Stanley Kubrick, 2001: A Space Odyssey. I mean, I'm not going to sum it up better than you did earlier. The plaudits of that film. Um, the only thing, when I think of 2001: A Space Odyssey, it's not even a film; it's an experience.
Yeah.
And I've never really felt that more. Um, Martin Scorsese, The Irishman. Marty was a tough one, because you could give this award to a lot of different Marty films, but for me, The Irishman, and we went to see that together,
Mm-hmm.
was a fantastic film experience. Really felt like his magnum opus after a 5-decade long career's worth of work, everything culminating together. Back with the old gang too, Pacino, Pesci, De Niro. Um, Peter Jackson, The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. I think the making of The Lord of the Rings, those three films all together, and everything that they did in terms of the scale of the production, adapting the work, the visual effects, everything was so groundbreaking. I truly believe the work that went into making the Lord of the Rings what it was is one of the greatest achievements in cinema history, and that really all falls on Peter Jackson's shoulders. Of course, tons of help and a huge cast and crew, but really his vision at the end of the day. But my winner is Francis Ford Coppola for The Godfather. And it's just one word: perfection. I think it is the definition of perfection when it comes to filmmaking, and his directorial lens. And also, just to think of the absolute tear that Coppola went on between The Godfather, The Conversation, The Godfather Part 2, and Apocalypse Now. I don't know if anybody has ever been on that strong of a directing game in such a time frame. So that's why I'm going with old Francis Ford.
Yeah, the breadth of those four movies too. Like The Godfather and The Godfather Part Two, sure, like big gangster epic, but it's also more than that. It's a family story. You're traveling
Yep.
through time. You're traveling all over the country, the world. The Conversation. He nails the paranoia. He nails the chase. He nails the investigation. He nails like looking over your shoulder. And that kind of goes into Apocalypse Now too, because all of those feelings, everything I just said about those other three movies, are like wrapped up into Apocalypse Now, but just so internally, because they're going down the river, they're descending into hell, like I said before, in terms of the cinematography. But that's also what the movie's about. Like these guys are just going to hell to meet the devil. And yeah, Francis Ford. I'm very curious about Megalopolis.
Yeah.
Um, but
Hopefully we get to see it.
I mean, you don't think so? You think it'll?
No, I think we do, but for a long time, I think it seemed to be in question.
Yeah, but now
There
that
was
they're
just,
actually
there was just,
filming it,
yeah, I mean, there's just, I know, but there was just story after story about issues that, yeah, they're filming it now, but who knows? There could be, I hope not, knock on wood, but there could be issues in post production. So I just hope we see it,
I hope we
is
see
all
it
I'm going to
too.
say.
I think it's gonna be a big mess, but I'm super excited for it because it's,
Yeah.
when's the last time he actually made? I mean, he's made movies over the last 30, 40 years, but a lot of
It's
them are
been a,
stinkers. Honestly, there's some bad, like one of our best directors has made some pretty bad movies.
yeah.
Um, so I'm curious to see him with this crazy budget, crazy cast again.
Yeah. All right. We are down to our final three categories here. It's been quite a ride. But certainly not uh we are saving the best for last. And stumble over my words there a bit. But our next category is Best Lead Actress. Um, my nominees are Audrey Hepburn for Roman Holiday, Sophia Loren for Marriage Italian Style, Kate Blanchett for Carol, Jodie Foster for The Silence of the Lambs, and Natalie Portman for Black Swan. Dom, who are your nominees?
I have Julie Christie for Constance Miller in McCabe and Mrs. Miller, 1971. I have Jenna Rollins playing Mabel Longhetti, A Woman Under the Influence, 1974. For the longest time, I thought it
Is
was
it Jenna or Gina?
confirmed Jenna. I thought it
Okay.
was Gina for a long time, and then we watched Love Stream special features after the movie, because Ben owns the Criterion, and everyone was saying Jenna, 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 and I was like, holy shit, it's Jenna. So it was like
Interesting.
I just assumed for
Jenna
so
with a
long.
G.
Jenna with a G. Um, Faye Dunaway as Diana Christensen in Network, 1976. She won. Jumping 30 years. We're in 2006. Kate Winslet playing Sarah Pierce in Little Children. And I can't stay away from her. Kate Blanchett as Lydia Tarr in Tar, 2022. So we have an actress shared between us, but that's kind of it. What attracts you to these female performances?
It's tough to put a pin on. I don't necessarily have a theme throughout this one like I have in other categories. And that's sort of my case with all of the acting stuff. It's really just performances that stick with me, and also actresses that dazzle on screen, right? That you can't take your eyes off. Um, and really you feel transform into their characters. You feel like you get to know that character. You feel like they're living that character. Um, Audrey Hepburn in Roman Holiday, like I said earlier when we were talking best original song, I've just become completely infatuated with her. And I think like a lot of times in older films, sometimes they got a little bit of like old timey acting, and you got to kind of look past it a little bit. Um, like the list of great actors from way back in the day, I think is sort of a short list at times. But Audrey Hepburn as Princess Anne in Roman Holiday was just so probably one of the most charismatic performances that I've ever seen. Like I wanted to be hanging out with her going throughout Rome. Um, Sophia Loren, as an Italian, I feel like Sophia Loren is part of my family when I watch her on screen, really. Um, and specifically when she's paired up with Marcello Mastroianni, and they did for several films. It's great. One of the greatest uh, collaborative partnerships in film history, I think, is Sophia Loren and Marcello Mastroianni. In Divorce Italian Style, which both you and I have seen, she's fantastic in that. She was actually the first person ever to win an Oscar um, for a foreign performance. She won for Two Women, and then the next after that was many years later with Roberto Benigni in La Vita Bella. I actually haven't seen Two Women. It's a fault of mine, but in Marriage Italian Style, she's stunning to say the least. Um, Jodie Foster, The Silence of the Lambs, it's one of my all-time favorite films. And the way that she goes toe to toe with Anthony Hopkins and the performance he delivers, and just like any scene, there's very few scenes that they're actually in together, but the scenes they are in together, um, you can't take your eyes off. You just want more. Natalie Portman, the transformation that she goes through in Black Swan, is there's not much you can say about it really. It's just so enigmatic. And then lastly, Kate Blanchett for Carol. Kate Blanchett is going to be my winner. She is my all-time favorite actress. I love everything that she is in. Um, it all started with the Lord of the Rings. Like that's, Galadriel as a kid. That's when my Kate Blanchett obsession began, and it's kind of beyond reason now. I don't know why. I just am. She's my favorite. She's on my Mount Rushmore. And she's won for other films, but she's won for The Aviator. She's won for Blue Jasmine. It was a tough call for me between Tar and Carol, but Carol is my favorite performance of hers. Carol Laird, there's so much hope and sorrow at the same time in that character. Um, yeah, it's my favorite Kate Blanchett performance, and she's my winner.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaker. I rewatched it around Christmas time, and everyone is just so devastating in the movie, and you feel for everyone. Like Kyle
Mm-hmm.
Chandler is supposed to play like the husband that's holding her back, but you feel just as bad for him as you
Yeah.
do for her being stuck with him at times. And it's because of Kate and Rooney mostly, but it's everyone in that movie. It's a great movie. Um, did I even say my nominees?
You
Or
did.
yeah,
You did.
yeah,
I
I
just
did.
spoke for a really long time, but now
No,
you have
you're
to
okay.
give us justification here.
Um, Again, it's about honesty. Julie Christie as Constance Miller is the opium addicted madame of a brothel in the Wild West. It's quite the performance because she's charming and she takes charge, but then she's hiding so much underneath her. Have you seen McCabe and Mrs. Miller?
Oh yeah, great film.
Fucking awesome movie.
Warren Beatty.
Yep. And she is you know, there's McCabe, and he's iconic for being, you know, a cool guy and all this stuff. He has a look, but I think Mrs. Miller is just as iconic as Warren Beatty in that
Yeah.
movie.
Just trudging through the snow in that film. I love it. It's like
The ending is
it's
amazing.
seedy, you know?
No, yeah. Really quiet ending of the gunfight, just sneaking around, hiding from people, and then the little Derringer moment where it comes out of his sleeve, and
Yeah.
it plays with myth making a lot. Like you know, there's the myth that he shot somebody, and then the bounty hunter for the guys that are shaking down the town takes one look at McCabe, and he's like, that man never killed anyone. Like, killing the myth, but at the end of the movie, it makes you question if he did or not, just because
Mhm.
of the way it's just so good. So much good shit in that. I'm just gonna talk about Jenna Rollins for a minute. All
Yeah.
these women do huge emotional transformations, and they're so honest and raw. But Jenna Rollins taps into something with John Cassavetes, who was her husband, in Woman Under the Influence. And I think it's that people are unpredictable, and that you don't really know why people act a certain way sometimes, and they're impulsive and they're emotional, and they'll do things that you don't understand, that you'll question. But as you see them work, as you see them just live their lives in these movies, you kind of understand why they are the way they are without really understanding them. Um, just a powerhouse performance. I've only seen the movie once, but the fact that I keep looking at it and thinking about it and talking about it, I mean, it's one of the most, if you want to learn about character, look at John Cassavetes, look at Jenna Rollins. Like, that's kind of it. It's just like, no one exemplifies, I said it before, but no one brings the human experience on screen like the two of them together. And he's a great actor too, but he's a
Mhm.
amazing director. Best actor, man, what a category.
This one was tough too. This was really difficult.
They're all tough too, because like, jumping back a minute to Kate Winslet in Little Children, I was between her in Little Children and her in Eternal Sunshine, but I went with Little Children because it's a little more like manic pixie dream girl in Eternal Sunshine. She's more of
Mhm.
like an object to chase or an object of affection. And in Little Children, she's like a broken woman that wants more, that's like pulled in so many different ways, that's like in lust with a man. And I don't know, she's the end of that movie, and her disappointment, and what her how her dream doesn't happen. It's sad shit at the end of that movie, and Kate
Mhm.
Winslet's pretty perfect. But going back to lead actor, let's keep it moving. I have Peter Finch as Howard Beale in Network 1976. He won for that. I have Robert De Niro as Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull. He won in 1980 for that. I have Nick Cage as Donald and Charlie Kaufman in Adaptation in 2002. I have Joaquin Phoenix as Freddie Quell in The Master in 2012. And I have Daniel Day-Lewis as Reynolds Woodcock in Phantom Thread in 2017. I'm not going to repeat myself too much more. It's about, like I said, it's about these people being people. I tried to pick kind of like different types of people in a way. Like, I picked the Mad Prophet on air in Network. Jake LaMotta is just like, my girlfriend Kelly hates Raging Bull. We only watched it
Yeah.
one time, and it's because she says the characters aren't likable. But that's the story. It's not.
Mhm.
It's about this horrible guy and how he is kind of on top in a way, or he is a master of his domain, but he still falls as hard as anyone else. Like, the ending of that movie and where he ends up, and De Niro's physical performance is just fucking incredible every time. Like, he is so terrifying in that movie. Joe Pesci is amazing as his brother. Their back and forth, their dynamic is so believable as siblings, that like, oh, you're kind of he's a fucking maniac. You're kind of scared of him. You're afraid of like how he's gonna react or what he's gonna do. Like, there's a tepidness around De Niro in that movie that makes him even more scary as Jake LaMotta. Like I said before about Nick Cage, he's playing two very different characters who look alike, and it's a yin and yang. in adaptation. That's why I want to recognize that. And then I think PTA is able to tap into people just like John Cassavetes is. Joaquin Phoenix is channeling something absolutely incredible in The Master. And it's again, it's raw, it's animalistic. This guy went to war, he's traumatized, and now he's literally addicted to drinking gasoline, and he's a sex addict and stuff. Like, there's nothing. It's really interesting to watch people chase their impulses and chase like what they're hungry for. And that's a movie where Joaquin Phoenix is chasing something. He doesn't know what he's chasing. I think he's chasing family, and he's chasing love, and he's chasing purpose. And there's just, I mean, Joaquin Phoenix is like one of our greatest working actors today. And The Master is like my go-to example of why he deserves that title.
All right, and my 5 nominees for Best Lead Actor are Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood, Anthony Hopkins in The Silence of the Lambs, Marlon Brando in The Godfather, Paul Newman in Cool Hand Luke, and Al Pacino in The Godfather Part 2. And unlike the Best Actress category, I actually do have sort of a theme with my Best Actors. And at the end of the day, they're just my favorite characters ever. I do think they obviously are also the greatest performances ever, but they really are my favorite characters. Like, they're the guys that I'm quoting, I'm impersonating, and always draw me back to these films. And also have delivered fantastic bodies of work, right? I think every single person on this list I could nominate for Best Lead Actor in another film, right? Daniel Day-Lewis, you chose Phantom Thread. I chose There Will Be Blood. Anthony Hopkins, Silence of the Lambs. I could have also chosen The Father. Marlon Brando, The Godfather, On the Waterfront. Paul Newman, Cool Hand Luke. Could have picked The Hustler. Could have picked Color of Money. There's so many. And Al Pacino, The Godfather Part 2. He should have won for that. I can't believe it. It took so many years for Al Pacino to win. Could have nommed him for Godfather 1, Dog Day Afternoon. The list is endless. But that's really, for me, why I chose all 5 of these guys. I'm dressed like Marlon Brando, so I'm just going to do my Godfather impression. Usually I stuff the gauze in my mouth, but you know, you come to me on the day of my daughters to be wed. You ask me to commit murder. That I cannot do. I love my Anthony Hopkins. I have the mask. I actually was Anthony Hopkins. You could check us out.
I saw that photo.
Yeah, on the Instagram. And then my winner, Daniel Day-Lewis. He's my all-time favorite actor in so many films, but Daniel Plainview, I mean, it just doesn't get better than Drainage. It doesn't. Drainage. I drink your milkshake. Particularly this scene when they're in the church with Paul Dano and he's got him by the hair and he's like, "Forgive me, God. Give me the blood, God.
I've abandoned my child.
Yeah, I've abandoned my child. Oh, gosh. I just wanted to do my impressions for a minute. That's really why I nominated all these actors, was just so I could do my impressions. But also, I just got to give love to Paul Newman, the coolest guy ever, the coolest guy in Hollywood, the last movie star. Over the pandemic, I just did like a deep dive on Paul Newman films and just like fell in love. He's the greatest. So I had to give Cool Hand Luke some love there as well. But I'm picking Daniel Day-Lewis as my winner here.
And so am I, but for a totally different performance. I almost chose There Will Be Blood, but something about Reynolds Woodcock has always attracted me a little more. It's so crazy to watch the most talented actor ever disappear. And that's what he does every time he disappears, and he disappears in There Will Be Blood, and he disappears in Phantom Thread in totally opposite ways. Like,
I thought you meant like disappears for real. Like he's
No.
not acting again.
I mean, he kind of does. He like I don't see Daniel Day-Lewis when I watch him in movies. Like I see the
Yeah.
character. Um, but the sensitivity, the mind games, the delicate nature of Reynolds Woodcock, the keeping everyone at arm's length, and the history with his mom and his sister, it's just so palpable, and
Yeah.
it I
He
watched.
can't begin his day with confrontation. I
No, and
love that scene. He's
I
so
mean,
persnickety.
it's a great. I mean, they have one of the best. PTA and DDL have such a great working relationship, and they've only made 2 movies together. Phantom Thread is the movie that he retired on, and it's fucking crazy to me that Gary Oldman won for being in a fat suit
Yeah.
over DDL as Reynolds Woodcock, who is it's one of the most devastate. It's hilarious. It's scary kind of, but in like an on your toes, my boss is around way. Um, you empathize with his fucked up romantic life. It's just so fucking good. Like in the first 5 minutes of that movie, you know who Reynolds Woodcock is. They show you everything you need to know about Reynolds Woodcock and how he disposes of women, how he uses people, and how he avoids confrontation, yada 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 yada. And then
Hmm.
to watch it slowly, to watch all those steps in a slower fashion with Vicky Krieps' character. I don't know, that movie is just really something because it's not about surprises, it's not about twists or like a revelation, it's not about a big moment, it's just about like the journey. And so is There Will Be Blood. Like that cut at the end where it jumps 20 something years and it's DDL in that
In
mansion
his
by
cardigan.
himself. Oh my god, like you believe that man has been going crazy in that house by himself
Hmm.
for 20 years. You see it in his eyes, you see it in his face. um yeah,
All the way over here.
it's all so good.
Paul was the chosen one.
Do you believe he's retired? Do you believe it'll stick?
I sure hope not. I really hope not. He's gotta get the itch again at some point. He's gotta get bored, right?
I would
He's
think, and
too
I
good not to act again. He's
he's
too
too good
good.
not to act again. And I would, when he comes back, I hope it's with somebody like Paul Thomas Anderson, or I hope it's with a new young filmmaker that he's attracted to. That would be interesting too. If somebody like unknown, some like a
Yeah.
script, as if a script gets to him that's like under the radar and he's attracted to it,
Mhm.
that would be a worthy retirement, unretirement or whatever.
Yeah.
But
All right. Before we move on to Best Picture,
yeah,
I want you to rate my impressions, the 3 that I did.
you did DDL, Hopkins, and Brando. I'm gonna
Yeah.
say DDL 1,
Yeah. It's
uh
usually my best.
Brando 2, and Hopkins 3, just because Hopkins is pretty limited in yours.
Yeah. Oh, I can do a little more Hopkins. I can.
Well, I guess let's see.
Did the lamb stop crying or did the lamb stop screaming, Clarice? I mean, I don't do it as well as the Brando.
I'm gonna stick with my ranking.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Oh, I a census taker tested me once and I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. It was a little better.
A
But all
little.
right, best picture, best picture. Getting a little loopy here. We've been on this podcast a long fucking time.
I know. And I guess before we end, let's just think about the Oscars for a minute.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see what types of movies Hollywood was making, what was getting attention, what people were attracted to, like, and for the most part, it's genre based and it's character based.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Academy has changed for the worse in the last 20, 30 years, and the things we are nominating and the things we are awarding are I mean, it's been proven in the past with certain movies like How Green Is My Valley or whatever, or my Left Foot or some stupid shit that wins all the awards, but the movies that we continually talk about were right underneath it. They were right there waiting for the award. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's part of my that's part of my influence in the best picture pick, with at least like a couple of them.
Mm-hmm.
Is just like, man, this fucking won Best Picture. Like this was nominated. A movie like some of the movies I'm gonna list would never be given the time of day today. And
Mm-hmm.
um, it goes back to, what does it go back to?
One of the films I'm gonna list was nominated 11 times, did not win a single award.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
So yeah, I don't know what I'm really getting at here, other than I think the Academy is pretty stilted and self-conscious and afraid of going places. I think they're afraid of exploration. Certain
Mm-hmm.
things defy that rule. Parasite like blew us all away when it won a few years ago, but the exception is pretty few.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Although, maybe things are changing. This year is certainly a bit unexpected. I think there's a lot of good happening.
I think there's a lot of good happening. But at the same time, maybe I'm just a hater, but I'm like, have you seen Triangle of Sadness?
No, but I know how you feel about it. I'm afraid to watch it, to be honest.
Man, I just don't know what people are watching that I'm not. And same
Yeah.
with like Everything Everywhere. I don't want to shit on that too much just because it's like original and it's a little bold, but to me it's like, aren't I goofy? Look at me. Aren't we goofy? Haha. I'm being silly. Aren't I being
Yeah.
silly? And I think people are just like, they fell for the trick a little bit with both those movies. Like, aren't I prestige? Aren't I telling you what you want to hear about rich people? Isn't
Yeah.
this isn't
Although I
this
feel like Everything Everywhere All at Once, I feel like is very out of the norm though for what we would come to expect to be nominated and to win.
No, it definitely is.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, I don't want to shit on it too much, but at the same time, like I want to see more Everything Everywhere All at Once's, but I also want to
Mm-hmm.
see better versions of them too.
Yeah. I will say I love the film. I think it's great. I think I've no issue with it winning Best Picture. I do though have a little bit of reservation with it winning like probably the 5 to 7 Oscars that it's going to be projected to win. Just because like that's a significant amount, right?
Yeah.
One of the bigger wins in the last, decade or so, one of the more dominant films. And I think there's a lot of films this year that deserve to win something that probably aren't. So that's a little disappointing. Banshees might not win anything, Tar might not win anything, Fablemans might not win anything. So I would have liked to see the love spread a little bit more, but I mean, all in all, I do appreciate the hype train that is behind Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think it is great, for having a more diverse film in the Oscars. So we'll see how it plays out. But no, I definitely see where you're going. I think, in the past few years in general, there, like you said, exceptions, but the
Like
Oscars,
Coda winning, like
that was crazy. Yeah.
I mean,
I loved it too. I loved it, but it was a Hallmark movie, but I loved
a
it.
day later, like no one's remembering Coda. Coda is not standing
Yeah.
the test of time, and that's
Yeah.
kind of what
Green Book.
that's what I looked at in the past. Like another one of his movies is on my list, but like the fact that The Exorcist was one of the biggest movies the year it was nominated, like that's a fucking horror movie.
Yeah, I would never get nominated today.
And same with like French Connection's on my list, but like French Connection, it's a cop movie, it's an action movie. Like I would like to see the stats. How many Oscar nominated movies have sick ass car chases in them?
Mm-hmm. I will say though,
Probably only a couple.
I think to a certain extent though, right? It's also a commentary on the types of films that are being made today and people less willing to go out on a limb to make films outside of the box and against the norm.
No, of course. Yeah, yeah. It's I mean, that's what it is. Like we only have what we have.
Yeah.
We can't.
It's funny though, because like to the average viewer, they're like, oh, the Oscars they're films that nobody ever likes or sees, Um, But again, that's not always true. So
There's a couple of those every year, but for the most part, they're overlooking there's so many smaller budget indies and stuff that are so interesting or pulling bold choices, and they're not even considered. I mean, they don't have the
yeah.
money for a campaign. They don't have a money to like put a team together to focus on that for a year, to
Yeah.
push a movie for a year, like Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like the fact that we're still talking about it a year later, I mean, shows just how effective their campaign was. But I don't know. I guess this is a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
Let's
Let's
wrap
get
this.
to it.
Let's wrap
Best
this up.
picture. Best picture.
I'm gonna fly through this kind of quick. 1941, I have Citizen Kane. 1969, I have Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. 1971, French Connection won Best Picture. 1975, I have Barry Lyndon, Network, or 1976, Network and Taxi Driver. 1979, Apocalypse Now. 2007, There Will Be Blood. 2010, The Social Network, and 2019, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I try to choose important movies to me, but also a variety of movies. I mean, Citizen Kane is one of the. It's like you could say it's the best movie ever made, and I wouldn't really disagree with you. The way they tell like a epic story about a man's life, but also make it really personal. So much iconic dialogue and shots in that movie. The sled and everything, like it's just it's
The snow globe.
the snow globe. There's just so much great imagery in that movie, and Orson Welles is just a fucking force of nature. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. That's also, or why don't you say your movies and then we can.
Yeah. Okay. So my nominees are The Godfather, La Vita Bella, also known as Life is Beautiful, The Silence of the Lambs, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, There Will Be Blood, Apocalypse Now, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, The Irishman, E.T., and 12 Angry Men. Really, for me, these 10 films, I most of them, don't come as any surprise because I nominated them several other times tonight in other categories. The only two films I didn't give any other, actually, La Vita Bella is the only film that did not get a nomination in any other category, although it won several Oscars. And that's just because I chose Cinema Paradiso over it to split that vote, if you will. But everything else I nominated, and at the end of the day, really, I think they're all fantastic films, but they're just my favorites. Like these are the films that I'm always drawn back to that I want to rewatch. Some of them won Best Picture, some of them I think were snubbed. And I think all of these films really stand the test of time as great films. And I also like how we have a little bit of crossover. We actually have more similarity than I thought we would. We both put There Will Be Blood, Apocalypse Now, and Butch Cassidy.
So 3 out of 10. I mean, it's pretty obvious why we chose those three movies.
I will say, I think Butch Cassidy in particular is a film that not enough people have seen. Flies under the radar a little bit, but is like one of the all-time greats. I mean, Paul Newman, Robert Redford, does not get better than that.
No, yeah, I think what I'm searching for the words here is like, I just miss it when a bunch of people got together, they made a cool movie and they had fun and you could tell that was happening. Butch Cassidy is like the prime example of that. I think it's a different movie than people like if you watch Butch Cassidy today with no expectations for it, it's probably a different movie than you might think it would be. It was for me, both in terms of like the weird like love triangle they have going on. There's sick action in it, but it's also really tender. And
I have a friend who hates Westerns that really likes this film.
I don't know how you can like I don't know how you would be able to hate this movie. It's like
no, God, no.
It's just a kind of a perfect movie in the music, in the way it looks. Like I almost chose this for best cinematography. and
Yeah,
I didn't even nominate it, but it's because
same.
it honestly reminds me of Barry Lyndon a bit, like the slow zooms. There's like a real artifice to the blocking and the frames. Like the travel segments of Butch and Sundance are like some of the most they it makes you believe they're traveling. It makes you believe in the sense of adventure the movie's supposed to have. And like the shot where the train blows up and like all the wood flies at them and at the camera, like there's just so many moments in the movie that like kind of
Jumping off the cliff.
left me speechless. Yeah,
I
it's just
can't swim.
it's really great.
It's a film that
Um
puts a smile on your face just thinking about it.
no, and
As
honestly,
do a lot of these. That's how I feel about E.T., you know, like I think that's Spielberg's best film for me at the end of the
no,
day. And
it, yeah.
he has so many greats. Um La Vita Bella, that puts a smile on my face, but also makes me shed a tear because it's a devastating film. But um, you know, that's I tried to go for variety too, you know, like stuff that warms the heart, stuff that's deeply dramatic, you know, like The Godfather, There Will Be Blood, things that are just downright dark and horrific, like Silence of the Lambs, Apocalypse Now. Um, yeah, you got a whole smorgasbord here. I feel like we've really said what there is to say about a lot of these films. Unless
Yeah,
you have any,
they've popped up I mean, all these movies have popped up in other categories, and I think we've
yeah,
kind of addressed them and why they're important to us. I haven't talked about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood though, and I
yeah, no, you haven't.
that's my winner. I think that right now that's just like my favorite movie, and that's why I picked it.
Hmm.
Natalie has some friends here that I had a conversation with them the first time we like all hung out together, and they were telling me why they hated the movie,
A
and
lot of people hate it, but I'm
and
with you. I
they
love it.
they think it's slow. They think the ending is the best part. They think it's kind of meandering and pointless. And I think it's like the opposite of all that. I think it's like a really beautiful what if fairy tale in the same way like Inglorious Bastards is like a what if at the end of the movie, and
Hmm.
so is this in a way, but it's the build up that makes the what if magic. Like
Yeah.
Leo as like a failing actor, there's a lot of like legacy things he's working through. You can look at Rick Dalton as a lot of actors. I mean, you can like put a lot of real life people over that character and see the comparisons and see like and see what Leo is kind of like grappling with as a movie star at the same time. Brad Pitt is just having the time of his life. I don't think he's ever been more charming and more charismatic than in this movie. All the side characters, Al Pacino, Margaret Qualley, um, the Austin Butler on the in the Manson family, Dakota Fanning is great in her one scene. Uh, Bruce Dern as the guy that owns is George Spahn, who owns Spahn Movie Ranch, where the Manson family lives. Like the world is just so alive, and I I have this thing where I love fiction. I love when fiction infiltrates reality. That's my favorite
Hmm.
shit. That's why I like Curb Your Enthusiasm so much. Like when somebody is operating in in a real world, but they're acting outside of the world. I don't know. It's a really interesting way to facilitate a movie. And obviously the heart and soul of this movie is Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate. And basically you're just watching Sharon Tate live her life for 2 hours. And people think it was pointless. They hated seeing her watch herself at the movies, but it's like honoring her. They're letting her have one last day on earth where it's just she goes to see a movie, she walks around, she gets lunch, she picks up a book, she goes to dinner with her friends, she's pregnant and uncomfortable. Like there's a real magic to that movie, and I think for the first 2/3, Quentin is doing his most like emotionally charged, introspective, personal work, and then at the end, he's spinning this crazy fairy tale, um, and giving all these people another day to live, and also like hey, Rick Dalton might be in a Roman Polanski movie now. Who knows? Like, it gives everyone a really great send off, and I just love the vibes of it, just the hanging out, driving around Hollywood, watching Brad Pitt listen to music, hanging with his dog, and that like every person's house is perfect everywhere they go. The narration, the flashbacks, the structure, the music, it's just like, it doesn't get better than that for me. That's what I want from a movie, and it delivers.
Yeah, well, very well said. I've always thought it was an underappreciated Tarantino film, one of my favorites.
It's the best. I don't. It's straight up
My favorite's
best movie.
Mine's Inglourious Bastards, but
That's probably number 2.
yeah,
And it's like, but they're so different, you know.
Oh, totally. My winner will come as no surprise to anyone that has ever known me. It is The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. They have been my favorite films for 20 years. Like I said earlier, I rewatch them every single year, probably even several times. And I don't know. The Lord of the Rings is like a film that I like take personally almost. That's how much I love it. Whereas like someone doesn't like it, I'm like, fuck you, you're wrong, you know? Or you know, if I sit here and I claim like, you know, I'll say like, yeah, it's one of the greatest achievements in cinematic history, and then people are like, oh, you know, like I take it personally. Like I feel like even though Return of the King won 11 Oscars and is, you know, holds the record, ties the record with Titanic for the most Oscars ever, I still feel like it's almost missing its place in cinema history. I feel like in retrospect, it's kind of been downplayed a little bit and almost like forgotten as like this fantasy film, you know. And obviously, like it's still a big deal, right? Like they have the show now, The Rings of Power, and you know, the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien is still within the public conscious, but I don't know, to me, The Lord of the Rings, like cinematically, has always been bigger than fantasy. It's always been like a next step beyond, you know, other franchises, but like people will throw it right in there with every other fantasy or sci-fi franchise that there is. Like, with all due respect to Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings is no fucking Harry Potter.
No, I
And
always
I'm gonna
thought that
piss
was a
people off.
funny
I'm gonna piss people off by saying that, but you know,
you're only gonna piss off the weirdos because, like, I don't know how you look at both those movies and think they're on the same scale at all.
yeah,
Like Harry Potter is a children's book adaptation, and Lord of the Rings is an epic fantasy. Like, I don't know. They're just like not even in the same realm as
Yeah.
both in the story and in like the feat of making those movies. I think people take for granted how impressive Lord of the Rings is technically. Like, and maybe it's the fantasy thing that throws most people off, where they're like, I don't like that stuff. I don't like wizards or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, it's like what you said. It's bigger than the movies.
Yeah. We've done it before. We've done other podcast episodes. You know, I could go on about the Lord of the Rings for like the next 2 hours, and
Yeah.
to spare it, I mean, I'll just say like it's at the end of the day, they're my favorite films. Funny enough, you know, The Return of the King is, you know, was the one that was awarded. It caps off, you know, the success of the whole trilogy. But The Two Towers is my favorite personally out of the three, but for the sake of, you know, everything that it meant and really putting the finishing touches, I'm going with The Return of the King for this one, if we're being specific.
And there it is. There's our first, and honestly, I'm calling it now. This is the only time we're doing this shit.
Yeah.
I'm
exhausted.
I don't know who is still listening at this point, but I guess for me and you,
maybe they skipped to the end.
I'm super glad we did this because
yeah,
it was fun to do and we talked about it for a bit, but it was a bit messy and it was a lot to cover. But I'm still glad we did it. I'm glad next episode, we're having a normal episode. I don't want fucking homework.
Yeah.
I don't want to do hours and hours of research and make a 10-page outline for a podcast that 4 people listen to. So next episode, we're just going to talk about movie news. We're going to talk about what's popular on the Twitter timeline.
We're going to keep it short.
It's going to be an hour long, I swear to God. But yeah, this is the point of the podcast, though, to have these big themed extravaganzas and then to go back to work next week, you know?
Yeah. At the end of the day, I don't care if anybody listens. I just like talking about movies.
No, this is for us. It's just I'm recording a conversation with one of my good buds.
Yep. I'm gonna put it into the National Archives.
Yeah. There's gonna be a floppy disk.
We're the next Siskel and Ebert.
Hell yeah. That wouldn't be a bad thing to be.
No, we need more of that.
Thanks for listening to Gravy Movies. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.